Marvel. Transmigrated as Hydra traitor. All talents can be exchanged for money. Chapter 41. General Ross was not the only high-ranking military official secretly pushing for the strong military plan. One of his rivals, a certain general, commissioned Osborne Industries to develop super weapons in an attempt to create a futuristic Iron Legion. But Norman Osborn's ambition went far beyond just developing high-tech weapons. Weapons have limits, but the potential of the human body is limitless. He had long been secretly supporting research into genetic modification within his company. Dr. Connors's lizard man research was a branch of this project. The research achieved phased results. But before the physical enhancement serum had passed its final test, Norman impatiently injected himself with it. To this day, he could not forget the thrill of kicking a researcher flying. The serum greatly enhanced Norman's strength, speed, and endurance, but severely damaged his nervous system, leading to the emergence of a second personality, a violent, paranoid, destructive, Green Goblin. Upon learning that other directors in the upper echelons of Osborne, the company he had founded, were trying to bypass him and sell the company at a low price, Norman Osborne retaliated. While Su Ming and Tony were still spending lavishly in Las Vegas, the Osborne Industries annual celebration grandly opened in New York. Socialites, company executives, and all employees enjoyed fine wine and delicious food at the event venue. Peter Parker also attended the event as a part-time photographer. The venue was filled with laughter and joy. Just as people were happily sharing their joy, Peter Parker's spider sense urgently warned him. It's him again. A green figure appeared above everyone's heads, riding a glider. Peter was no stranger to this person, who wore green armor and a devil mask. He had once invited Xiao Zhizhu to cooperate with him in a great endeavor, and his ambitious and murderous demeanor was still fresh in Peter Parker's memory. Norman Osborn, clad in a full set of combat gear developed by the company, locked onto the location of the company executives and threw out pumpkin bombs. You want to steal my hard work? Go to hell. A flash of explosion. Almost all the company executives turned into complete skeletal remains scattered on the ground. The pumpkin bombs instantly stripped them of all their flesh and their lives. This scene terrified everyone in the venue. As people frantically scattered and fled, Peter Parker ran to a corner, changed into his Spider-Man suit, and appeared in time to fight the Green Goblin. At this time, he still didn't know who this person was. Peter Parker could not stand by and watch the Green Goblin wantonly kill civilians. Peter quickly fell into a bitter struggle. The serum-enhanced Norman Osborn was violent, powerful, and possessed an endless array of high-tech equipment. Peter's almost shattered mask was the result of a pumpkin bomb. Norman, of course, knew that Spider-Man was Peter Parker. He had discovered Peter's secret when he attended a family gathering earlier. The wound on Peter's arm was even scratched by his own tracking dart. At first, he wanted to pull Spider-Man, who also possessed extraordinary physique like himself, to conspire for a great cause. Those who obey me prosper, those who defy me perish. But this Xiao Zhizhu's frequent obstruction of his actions completely enraged Norman's second personality. He vowed to eliminate all obstacles in his path. When he gained the upper hand in the battle, he made a common villain's mistake, talking too much. Peter was furious when he heard the Green Goblin threaten to kill Aunt May and Gwen. In a few moves, he beat the Green Goblin into a daze until Norman voluntarily took off his mask, and Peter was shocked to discover, wasn't this the father of his best friend, Harry Osborn? While Peter was stunned, Norman secretly controlled the glider to eject blades that shot towards Peter's back. But his spider sense detected it, and he narrowly dodged the fatal blow. Who would have thought that the blade would pierce directly into Norman's body? At the last moment, Norman Osborn's good nature returned, and he instructed Peter. Don't tell Harry. But when Peter brought Norman's body back to his house, his good friend Harry saw it. From then on, Harry also regarded Spider-Man as his father's killer, an irreconcilable enemy. Peter was in great pain internally. On one hand, he had never killed anyone, and facing death made him very uneasy. On the other hand, the deceased was his good friend's father, whom he had called uncle since childhood. He could not accept that the big boss in his memory, Uncle Norman, who always smiled at him, would die in front of him, and even because of him. He didn't know how to face his good friend Harry Osborn, who had lost his father. Nor did he know how to adjust his anxious state of mind. With his mind in a mess, Peter thought of Su Ming, and as if by some strange impulse, he came to his room. He sought a trace of inner peace. Listening to Peter Parker's whispered narration, Su Ming sighed. I didn't expect so much to happen in just a few days. Looking at Peter, who was now at a loss, Su Ming sighed again, still young. After thinking for a while, he spoke. Peter, congratulations. Xiao Zhizhu was bewildered by Su Ming's abrupt remark. You can clearly see how upset and conflicted he is right now, so why would you say something like that? Are you a devil? But thinking that Su Ming was older and more experienced, perhaps he had a different perspective. He quietly waited for Su Ming to continue. And Su Ming now regretted blurting out that sentence. Because he knew that Spider-Man could only truly grow after experiencing various setbacks, misunderstandings, and even the departure of loved ones. But many things hadn't happened yet, and he couldn't just tell him that the plot was arranged this way, could he? Even because of my appearance, Gwen's father didn't die, so you should be secretly happy, right? Is this something he can know? No. Peter Parker is still a student, and his mental growth still requires a process. Leading him astray would be a great sin. Thinking of this, Su Ming said gently. Yes, Peter. Congratulations. You have successfully passed another test of fate. Xiao Zhiju listened to Su Ming's words, deep in thought. Su Ming then began his great art of persuasion, pouring a large bowl of chicken soup into Peter's young heart. In short, Peter didn't kill anyone, and the Green Goblin brought it upon himself. Moreover, if Peter hadn't acted in time, there would have been more victims and families plunged into sorrow. Things like, those who do evil will eventually perish by their own hand. Things like, with great power comes great responsibility. Things like, he who wears the crown must bear its weight. And so on, and so on. To be fair, under Su Ming's powerful brainwashing, Peter's spirits visibly improved. In fact, Peter also knew that what Su Ming said was true, even if the Green Goblin, who regarded human lives as nothing, was his good friend's father, he couldn't escape the fact that he was a mad killer. Looking at Su Ming, who was patiently comforting him, Peter remembered his mercenary style, and a question couldn't help but arise in his mind. Sir, you clearly understand so many principles, why do you choose a path full of the stench of money? He then voiced the question in his heart. This question truly hit Su Ming's core. If I wasn't focused on making money, I would have died in the first episode, okay. Recalling the words he used to comfort Peter just now, those were all solid insights summarized from 9 years of compulsory education, comprehensive development in morality, intelligence, physical education, art, and labor, plus the harsh lessons of society. They were all high-level mental techniques, just learn them. Don't worry, once I earn enough money, I will also choose to become a superhero and save the world with you. Peter Parker's face was filled with excitement upon hearing this. He knew that Silver Duke would definitely embark on this glorious path. Oh my God, how does he know so much? His previously conflicted feelings suddenly cleared up after just a few words from him. Peter couldn't help but look at the man before him with new eyes, powerful, reasonable, calm, and wise. I must become a man like him. Peter told himself again in his heart. Su Ming comforted Peter with a benevolent expression, but his heart was screaming. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Money will never be enough. Superhero. Never in this life. Harry Osborn's carefree childhood came to an end. His father, Norman Osborn, was mercilessly killed by Spider-Man, and he had no choice but to take over the heavy responsibility of Osborn Industries' CEO at a young age. His father once told him that the Osborn family suffered from a very special hereditary disease, and that at a certain age, the illness would erupt, leading to a painful death. Peter's father had once developed gene fusion technology, and Spider-Man was a product of that technology. This technology could completely cure his family's hereditary disease. Harry thought that his father must have wanted to get Spider-Man's blood sample and clear all obstacles within the company before the illness struck. Who knew he wasn't a match for Spider-Man? You are my hero, father. Then, recalling Spider-Man's secretive appearance, he clenched his fists tightly. Spider-Man. You just wait. Waking up, Su Ming and Elisa enjoyed breakfast leisurely. Su Ming was a bit distracted. He recalled the joy and anticipation in Xiao Zhiju's eyes last night when he heard his bold declaration. Once I earn enough money, I'll team up with him to save the world. Su Ming felt deeply sinful. The child was too easy to trick. Just then, the phone rang, and Su Ming picked it up. It was Agent Hill. Bruce Banner was a biological scientist, and also a poor loser. However, during a military super soldier program, Banner was injected with a super soldier serum and then accidentally exposed to a massive amount of gamma radiation, causing his genes to mutate and turning him into a terrifying green monster. Here's a detail. The serum Banner was injected with was an early, unstable version of the super serum used by Captain America. It was just that Banner had also been subjected to gamma radiation. The delirious Banner not only destroyed the laboratory but also accidentally injured his girlfriend, Betty Ross, and her father, General Ross. After regaining his sanity, Banner looked at his injured girlfriend on the hospital bed, filled with remorse. To prevent this from happening again, and also to escape the military's pursuit. Bruce Banner hid in a slum in Brazil and Xenia, living a reclusive life with just himself and a dog. Aside from going to and from work every day, he would go to a dilapidated factory to learn Brazilian jiu-jitsu from a local master. He tried to control his anger by regulating his body. The angry Hulk inside him would appear when Banner's heart rate exceeded 200, and then instinctively destroy everything in his sight. After a period of study, Banner was already able to simply control his anger. As long as it doesn't go over 200, I'll be fine. Looking at the heart rate monitor on his wrist, Banner let out a long sigh. At the same time, Banner also met a scientist named Mr. Blue online. He had been helping Banner and suggested that there was a special flower that could eliminate the green cells in his body. Banner conducted his own experiments and found that at first, his blood cells could successfully turn back to red, but it quickly ended in failure. Mr. Blue said he needed Banner's blood sample to help Banner continue research on how to cure his mutated body. Banner's eyes lit up. If one more person researches with me how to undo the mutation, the speed will undoubtedly double. Full of anticipation, he sent out a large tube of his fresh blood. Little did he know that this blood sample would later create a powerful enemy for him. One day, at his post in the soda factory, Banner accidentally cut his finger, spilling a drop of blood. Although he carefully searched and wiped it clean, he didn't notice that half a drop of blood had already dripped into an empty soda bottle. The soda was sold to the United States, and an elderly man who drank the soda died instantly due to the strong genetic effect of Banner's blood. Through investigation, the military detected Banner's genes in the soda, thus exposing Banner's location. General Ross had never given up on Banner as an experimental subject. Having witnessed Banner's power after his transformation, he wanted to use Banner's genes to create more super soldiers. It's been over half a year, and I've finally found you, Banner. Excitement flashed in General Ross's eyes. But he knew how terrifying Banner was after transforming, so he assembled an elite team for the capture operation, specifically inviting an elite among elites, Colonel Emil Blonsky. Looking at the elite team armed to the teeth, General Ross's heart stirred, and he turned to order his secretary to notify S.H.I.E.L.D. of this discovery. What kind of thing is a bounty hunter? Can they even compare to the military? Since you specifically mentioned it, I'll give you this face. Recalling Nick Fury, General Ross didn't forget to look after his old comrade in arms. Then, he personally led the team to Brazil. Nick Fury received the notification from General Ross's secretary, knowing they had found the target's whereabouts. He immediately arranged for Agent Hill to contact Su Ming, telling him to take SHIELD's private jet to Brazil. Su Ming was still wondering if SHIELD's promise was reliable. If he delayed any longer, Tony would die from the poison, and where would he earn money then? Just then, Agent Hill called to tell him to get ready, as SHIELD's private jet would take him to Brazil. Su Ming's eyes lit up. SHIELD's efficiency is really good. Elisa heard that Su Ming seemed to be going to Brazil, and having been bored at home recently, she strongly requested to go with Su Ming. Boss, the life of daily shopping and beauty treatments is too boring. Take me with you. Su Ming looked at Elisa, whose skin had visibly improved, and silently rolled his eyes. This life is what all women dream of, and you're still not satisfied. Under the influence of his past life experiences, Su Ming knew how important a good boss was, so even though he only had Elisa as an employee now, he was very generous to her. When there was no task needing her help, he would give her tens of thousands in pocket money, making it seem to outsiders that Elisa was being kept by him. Alright, to prevent people from saying I'm keeping you, go pack your things immediately. Elisa screamed excitedly and scurried back to her room. When Su Ming and Elisa arrived in Brazil, the elite team had already begun fighting the Hulk. The factory was in ruins from the Hulk's rampage. Colonel Emil fired a precise burst from his automatic rifle at the Hulk, but the bullets couldn't penetrate his thick skin at all. Su Ming followed the path, not rushing to act. Looking at the flattened, large-dose tranquilizer darts scattered everywhere, he curled his lip. Trying to take down Hulk with this? Still a bit naive. Elisa, in a tight-fitting combat suit, blinked with curious eyes, looking at this rare grand scene, and exclaimed. Oh my, boss, what is that monster? The light was dim, and Elisa could only vaguely see a huge figure rushing back and forth among various large pieces of equipment. Listening to Elisa's words, Su Ming smiled slightly. This is a tough one. As soon as he finished speaking, a military officer who looked like an adjutant came near Su Ming, with an arrogant expression. Destiny, right, the general sent me to ask you, why didn't you pursue the target with the combat team? Finally, you've arrived, Su Ming thought to himself. Although Nick Fury had agreed to the terms with him, this was ultimately a military mission, and they were always ones to go back on their word. If he hadn't discussed the price with their general face to face, Su Ming would absolutely not have acted easily. I'm not a battle maniac. I'm here just to make money and complete Nick Fury's deal. He looked indifferently at the adjutant, finding him currently blocked by a pile of chaotic steel falling from the ceiling. Su Ming walked towards the adjutant, and in his shocked gaze, he gently pushed aside the steel obstacle weighing several tons. Clang! The adjutant subconsciously took a step back, his arrogant expression long gone, looking at Su Ming with surprise and doubt. Su Ming smiled politely. I want to see your general. Lead the way. Emil Blonsky suffered the first major setback of his career. As a colonel in the British Royal Marines, he was a battle-hardened, ruthless, and experienced soldier with numerous accomplishments. Ever since Bronsky was recruited by General Thaddeus Ross of the U.S. Army to join the hunt for Bruce Banner, his heart had known no peace. Recalling what happened in Brazil when his pursuit team led the operation. Large doses of tranquilizer darts couldn't even pierce the monster's skin, and when they switched to live ammunition and continued firing. Not only did they fail to harm him in the slightest, but one of their team members was killed in retaliation. Bronsky threw a high-explosive grenade, which landed precisely at the monster's feet. He thought, this time, I can finally inflict some damage on this monster. But after an explosion, everyone thought the target had been dealt with, but it pushed dozens of tons of large beverage cans, like a wild horse unbridled, crashing straight toward them. Two team members were instantly crushed into a twisted mess under the huge iron cans. This scene made even Bronsky, who was accustomed to life and death, exclaim, how tragic. The large iron can was still rapidly crashing towards Bronsky, who could only use all his strength to jump aside, narrowly avoiding it. Two giant beverage cans crashed together with a loud bang. Beverage splashed, drenching Colonel Emil from head to toe. The sweet, fruity scent of soda filled Bronsky's nostrils, but it couldn't alleviate the bitterness in his heart. Bronsky had initially thought this mission was just a simple hunting game. Now, it seemed they had become the prey. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, continuously firing at the monster, and then he witnessed a scene he would never forget. It was a face filled with extreme rage, with dark green pupils that sent shivers down one's spine. Just as he was stunned, Hulk directly picked up a forklift and threw it at him. Bronsky couldn't believe his eyes. A massive forklift was thrown like a mere ball. But the whistling wind from the flying forklift made Bronsky dare not stay put. He once again mustered all his strength and frantically fled, finally dodging the forklift's attack. Bronsky once again escaped the destiny of becoming a puddle of flesh. Hulk didn't continue the pursuit. Instead, he smashed through a wall and ran out, leaving only a roar echoing through the entire mountain forest. Colonel Emil Blonsky, exhausted just from escaping, realized he had finally escaped the danger. He adjusted his breathing on the spot, suppressing the resentment of the failed mission. General Ross actually concealed information. He decided to go and confront the general for an explanation. Walking behind his adjutant, Su Ming recalled the general he was about to meet, Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. This was an important figure in the Marvel Universe. General Ross spearheaded the reboot of the Super Soldier program, attempting to replicate the Captain America serum from World War II, aiming to establish a super army with superpowers. He recruited Banner to participate in gamma radiation research, but an experimental accident caused Banner to mutate. General Ross always believed that Banner was military property, and Banner's blood was a key material for creating biological weapons. He was a politician who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals, even launching a global pursuit. Finally, they arrived at a temporary command post. Looking at the busy soldiers who dared not even breathe heavily in front of General Ross, Su Ming snorted. Tisk, power. Then he looked at General Ross. His facial features were rigid, cheekbones high, and jawline sharp, highlighting the soldier's inherent steadfastness and ruthlessness. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, often filled with scrutiny and suspicion, as if constantly assessing an opponent's value and threat. His brows were habitually furrowed, forming a distinct Chuan character pattern. His complexion was dark, with a rough texture from wind and sun exposure, and his graying hair, though sparse, was meticulously combed. His physique was robust and burly. Although slightly stooped with age, he still maintained a soldier's upright posture. Su Ming thought to himself, this old guy is quite spirited. The adjutant whispered a few words of report to General Ross, and this vigorous general finally turned his gaze to Su Ming, frowning as if with some distaste. But when the adjutant mentioned Su Ming effortlessly pushing aside several tons of steel, the old general's eyes flickered, and his gaze towards Su Ming held a hint of curiosity. After the adjutant left, General Ross glanced at the slender Elisa, a flicker of admiration in his eyes, then scrutinized Su Ming up and down. You are the bounty hunter that Fury mentioned, what was your name again? General Ross's authoritative voice rang out, and the command post instantly became even quieter, as if afraid to disturb the general's conversation. Destiny. General Ross looked at the distinguished Eastern face before him, remembering that he too was a tough and handsome young man in his youth, and he snorted coldly. Why didn't you act when you saw the target? Nick Fury said you weren't like this. General Ross leaned his hands on the table, staring intently at Su Ming, his superior's aura fully unleashed, and the command post instantly fell into silence. Su Ming had, at one point, briefly encountered some people in positions of power, for example, when delivering food to them. This group of people all had one flaw. They were self-important and arrogant. Translated, it means, they put on airs. But he was no longer the beast of burden at the bottom of society. Even though General Ross's aura had already intimidated Elisa beside him, Su Ming's calm expression remained unchanged. General, there's no rush. Let's discuss the price first. He spoke indifferently. General Ross seemed to have heard something amusing and showed a hint of disdain. How dare you directly discuss business with me? Who do you think you are? Who do you think I am? But recalling the adjutant's recent report, General Ross knew that the person before him seemed to be as bold as he was skilled, and the adjutant would not lie. He didn't respond, merely walked out of his seat and looked down at Su Ming. Prove it to me. He would absolutely not waste any time on a useless person. Su Ming knew that the old man in front of him wouldn't act without seeing results, but why should he demonstrate for him? That was a different price. Wasn't the recommendation from Director Nick Fury of S.H.I.E.L.D. enough to explain the situation? Just then, the disheveled Emil Blonsky strode into the command post, followed by a remark. General, you never said there was such a monster beside Banner. I need an explanation. Blonsky was deeply resentful of the mission's failure, his heart filled with indignation and incomprehension, blaming all responsibility on General Ross for concealing information. The agitated Blonsky completely disregarded the fact that General Ross seemed to have two guests in front of him at the moment. In his view, if the general hadn't deliberately concealed information, his comrades wouldn't have died in vain. If Banner knew what kind of monster that was, I would have caught him, and I would make him tell me who that monster really is. That is Banner. General Ross ignored Su Ming and Elisa. In his eyes, Colonel Blonsky was more important, his sharpest soldier, and he deserved an explanation. Blonsky's expression froze. He had originally thought that the mysterious power came from Banner's accomplice, but the general's explanation left him utterly astonished. Blonsky looked down at the new automatic rifle in his hand, thinking that the weapon he had relied on for many years on the battlefield had been completely useless this time. He raised his arm, intending to throw the rifle to the ground to vent his intense indignation. What good are you anymore? But when the rifle was midair, it stopped. It was Su Ming. Su Ming had steadily caught the weapon that Blonsky was about to furiously smash to the ground. Sir, littering is not a good habit. With that, he took the rifle, crumpled it a few times in his hand, and accurately tossed it into a trash can a few meters away. The automatic rifle, made of composite steel, was like a discarded piece of paper in Su Ming's hands, crumpled into a ball the size of a coffee cup in just a few motions. It wasn't until it landed in the trash can with a loud thud that those present realized it was originally a gun. What the? Elisa instinctively raised her hand to cover her mouth, which was wide open in shock. Oh my god. Unbelievable. Cool. Watching her boss casually subdue everyone in the command center, it was also the first time Elisa had witnessed his abilities up close. After the initial shock, a strong sense of pride surged from her heart. Seeing Su Ming drop the trash and then put his hands behind his back, Elisa couldn't help but reach out and grab them. Su Ming's brow twitched. Feeling her fingers, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What is this little girl doing at a time like this? He maintained a profound expression on his face, but his fingers behind his back subtly wiggled, signaling Elisa not to mess around. Elisa seemed to have found something fun. One hand playfully grabbed Su Ming's fingers behind his back, and she didn't let go no matter how he struggled. At the same time, to avoid embarrassing her boss, she also maintained an unperturbed expression, but the occasional smirk on her face betrayed her. The soldiers in the command center were stunned. Just moments ago, they had witnessed an unbelievable scene. An FN Scar automatic rifle, in this man's hands, was like clay, truly crumpled up and thrown away like trash. And he threw it quite accurately. All the soldiers were looking at Su Ming with eyes that saw a monster. Blonsky stared blankly at the still swaying trash can, recalling what had just happened before his eyes. You must be kidding me. Blonsky felt that in just a few days, God had played several excessive jokes on him, to the point where he doubted if he was still dreaming. Hiss. He secretly touched the wound on his leg. It hurt. It's not a dream. So how did this person do it? Could I also become as strong as him? If it comes to strength, the mutated banner seems even stronger. The desire to become stronger burned in Bronski's heart like fire. He decided to go back and discuss it with General Ross. If there was a way for him to also possess that kind of power, Bronski would do it without hesitation. Thunder, General Ross admitted that he had underestimated this bounty hunter before. Destiny, is that right? Looking at the rifle Su Ming had destroyed with his bare hands, General Ross's eyes lit up. Isn't this the effect I'm looking for? His painstaking efforts to promote the research and development of the super soldier serum were precisely so that one day he could transform every one of his loyal soldiers into someone as powerful as Destiny before him. What made him so strong? Unless there was some special method, General Ross would absolutely not accept the idea of natural divine strength. That's right, the rich rely on technology, the poor rely on mutation. No one succeeds casually. General Ross, who had weathered countless storms, was not moved by Su Ming's inadvertently displayed strength. Instead, he thought of an even better idea. This bounty hunter's body could just help his research team perfect their super soldier serum research. Thinking of this, General Ross showed Su Ming a benevolent smile. Mr. Destiny, Fury said that as long as you're paid, you can do anything. Su Ming was not at all surprised by the change in General Ross's attitude. It would have been strange if he hadn't changed. Since they had entered the pleasant business negotiation phase, Su Ming was willing to hear what this old man was planning. Not just anything, General. He responded modestly. General Ross, of course, knew that no matter how much money he gave Destiny, there would be things he wouldn't accept, but this idea he had just come up with didn't seem excessive. Mr. Destiny, 100 million, give me a sample of your blood. The implication was, look, I still remember your rules, I'm giving you so much face, aren't you going to honestly agree? General Ross directly stated his thoughts. He wanted Banner's blood sample, and he wanted Su Ming's too. As long as he could accelerate the completion of the Super Soldier Serum project, he would have enough political capital to rise another level. Power. What a wonderful feeling. With a slight smile at the corner of his mouth, General Ross appeared very sincere at this moment. What? Su Ming hadn't expected this old man to actually set his sights on him. While surprised, he also began to calculate. Even if I wanted to give it, you'd have to have the ability to take it. Do you think Steel Body is playing around with you? Even I can't think of a good way to draw some blood from myself right now, and you, old man, really dare to think. I can easily make another fortune from him. But why would I agree directly without bargaining? Thinking of this, Su Ming smiled. I thought it was something difficult, but it's just a mere blood sample. Since the general thinks highly of me, 500 million, take it. How dare he? General Ross was indeed an old veteran of the political arena. Even though he wished he could greet Su Ming's entire family, his face still maintained that amiable appearance. 200 million, no more, Mr. Destiny. 400 million. 200 million. 300 million. 200 million. After some attempts, seeing General Ross's unwavering insistence on the 200 million price, Su Ming smiled wryly. When it came to bargaining, he really couldn't compare to officials. Mr. Destiny, 200 million is already a very, very high price. Your rule is a minimum of 100 million, but to make friends with you, I directly doubled the price. This is my sincerity, don't be too greedy. A magical scene appeared in General Ross's mind. Banner's blood in his left hand, Destiny's blood in his right hand, a clap of the two hands, as many super soldiers as he wanted. It was simply perfect. Thinking of this, he even began to explain to Su Ming. Bronski had already made up his mind that when he went back, he would definitely ask General Ross to give him some technology and tough stuff, so he could become bigger, stronger, and harder. At this moment, hearing the general negotiating with this bounty hunter, and knowing it concerned the general's research, he didn't interrupt. His eyes burned as he looked at Su Ming, waiting for his reply. Elisa's hand, which had been holding Su Ming's, had long since been seized by Su Ming's backhand. This time, no matter how she struggled, she couldn't break free, so she simply let Su Ming hold it. But hearing that General Ross and her boss were discussing a deal starting at 100 million, Elisa seemed to fall into a hallucination. When did her boss's money-making ability break through the heavens? What? Selling blood for money is undignified. Losing face. What a joke, isn't it just a little blood? She loses so much every month and doesn't earn an extra penny, right? Moreover, this is 100 million. A full 100 million. Oh my god. When the general raised the price to 200 million, Elisa's soul seemed to leave her body, she was numb. Su Ming released Elisa's hand, which was finally no longer causing trouble, and looked very reluctant. General Ross, I admit you're right, I was greedy. I accept your proposal. But, payment first. Of course. Haha. Regardless, the staff trying to collect a blood sample from Su Ming were in a frenzy, unable to pierce Su Ming's skin using various methods. When Bruce Banner regained consciousness, he was already in the deep mountains. He learned from passers-by that this was Guatemala. He hadn't expected to have run 15,000 miles overnight. But now was not the time to be surprised. He had to get the data as soon as possible. Perhaps there was a way to break the curse on him hidden there. He then hitchhiked to a nearby town. Penniless, he could only walk barefoot on the cobblestone road. When he was tired, he would just lean against somewhere, occasionally waking up from nightmares where he accidentally killed his girlfriend. When he was hungry, he would pick up some vegetable leaves at the market. The former prodigy was now in rags, and a passing little boy even mistook him for a beggar and put a few coins in his hand. How ironic. But Banner was not a sentimental person. He used the money to buy the largest size pants. Bruce Banner never gave up hope. He walked towards his destination, covering 1,600 kilometers in less than 17 days. Banner thought of Mr. Blue, who also had information about his genetic mutation. At the same time, the only person he could trust, Betty Ross, was also there. Banner snuck into the university, preparing to reunite with his girlfriend. Since the accident where he injured his girlfriend and fled, he couldn't remember how long it had been since he last saw Betty's face. Without any warning, Betty unexpectedly appeared in Banner's line of sight. His girlfriend, whom he hadn't seen in a long time, was still graceful and radiant. Just as he was about to go up and greet her, he was shocked to find that she already had a new companion. At this moment, Banner's heart was in agony. He understood that he no longer had the right to disturb her life. Perhaps silently leaving was his last act of tenderness. With a broken heart, Banner arrived at his old friend's pizza shop. This was his only refuge. His old friend's unconditional trust and support made him feel a long-lost warmth. Taking advantage of a delivery opportunity, Banner once again snuck into the campus. He successfully bribed the low-wage security guard with a box of pizza and quietly infiltrated his former laboratory. He searched hopefully for his experimental data. But the military had already destroyed all his data, and Banner found no useful clues. This left Banner disheartened, and in desperation, Banner could only choose to continue his escape. He packed his bags, ready to bid farewell to his old friend, but was unexpectedly discovered by his girlfriend. However, Banner dared not acknowledge her. Even as Betty's cries echoed through the street, Banner could only silently hide in the corner behind a trash can, grieving alone. Walking in the pouring rain, Banner's heart was icy cold. Passing vehicles, thinking he was insane, veered away. But at this moment, a car silently stopped behind him. It was Betty. Seeing that familiar figure, Betty, ignoring the rain soaking her entire body, ran towards Banner. Don't go. Don't go. The emotions that had been suppressed for so long finally found an outlet at this moment, and they embraced tightly. When Betty learned that Banner was looking for their original experimental data, she took Banner back home and took out an exquisite storage box, handing it to Banner. Inside was a USB drive. Betty had secretly backed up all the experimental data there. This data was like a lifeline, giving Banner hope for a cure. Perhaps you can continue to seek help from the military. Betty thought that since General Ross was her biological father, he should treat Banner well for her sake. But Banner knew General Ross's ambition well. No. He only wants to dissect me and weaponize the mutated cells. This was something he absolutely could not accept. I also have a friend. Banner thought of Mr. Blue, the friend he had met during his escape. New York. Just as General Ross's research team was still struggling with how to extract a blood sample from Su Ming, Bronsky found General Ross. Since the previous failed attempt to capture Banner, Bronsky's interest in the Hulk had grown stronger. And General Ross also keenly sensed his desire for power. So the general decided to reveal all the experimental secrets about Banner to Bronsky. Banner's experiment only reached a very preliminary stage and cannot yet be applied. He thought he was researching methods to resist radiation. I never told him the truth. He was too reckless, even experimenting on himself, which resulted in a great disaster. Or, a fortunate accident. General Ross, in front of Bronsky, deftly shifted the blame to Banner. Under the general's guidance, Bronsky went to the sealed warehouse and retrieved a vial of blue serum. This serum was a copy based on the serum injected into Captain America during World War II. Only then did Bronsky realize that General Ross intended to restart the World War II super soldier program. To hell with his ambition. I just want to become stronger. Looking at the blue serum, Bronsky's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. Although General Ross repeatedly warned him that injecting this serum carried immense risks and that obtaining unknown power was uncertain. If it failed, however, the injected person would die. Bronsky didn't care about these things. His inner desire for power now made him almost insane. Finally, with the assistance of 2 doctors, the blue serum was injected into Bronsky's body. Oh, God. Please. My God. Watching the strongest new injection needle snap against Su Ming's arm. The scientist responsible for collecting Su Ming's blood sample finally broke down. He couldn't understand why a simple action that any nurse could easily complete turned into a world-class problem in his hands. It's just a blood draw. What are you doing? General Ross also couldn't understand why something that should take a few minutes was still unresolved now that they were back in New York, with this annoying bounty hunter still loitering in front of him. Yes, ever since agreeing to General Ross's deal, Su Ming and Elisa had followed General Ross's research team from Brazil to the United States, enjoying good food and drink, but not a single drop of blood had been extracted from him. The scientist reported his days-long torment to General Ross with a bitter expression. The first time they tried to draw blood from Su Ming, the needle broke. Until now, they had wasted hundreds of needles and tried dozens of methods, but still couldn't even scratch Su Ming's skin. Su Ming, however, was very cooperative. He would do whatever was asked for the sake of blood collection. To get a blood sample, we can't use a pulverizer, can we? The repeatedly frustrated scientist even considered extreme methods. General Ross, upon understanding the situation, also fell into a daze. No. I spent 200 million. It's been days, and now you're telling me you can't draw blood. To this, the scientist could only helplessly state, not a drop could be drawn. General Ross rubbed his temples in frustration, admitting that even with his extensive combat experience, he seemed to be stumped this time. This Destiny isn't a monster, is he? He gradually began to entertain the idea of giving up, because power that couldn't be replicated was worthless to him. The past few days, during which Su Ming and Elisa were treated as VIPs by the military, their mood was genuinely good. They ate well, slept well, and got a free tour of the U.S. military's secret base, not to mention enjoying the constipated expressions of those people who couldn't do anything to them every day. Earning 200 million with just a few words, Su Ming himself was also curious about what methods the military would use against a steel body that wasn't even in its complete form yet. These past few days, Su Ming happily cooperated with the military's research team, engaging in comprehensive attempts on how to draw some blood from him. Undoubtedly, all ended in failure. I gave you a chance, but you're useless. Su Ming, chewing on a toothpick, glanced at the well-behaved Elisa, thinking to himself. At this moment, General Ross shamelessly approached Su Ming. Destiny, my friend. To be honest, I've never encountered such a thing, but since we can't draw blood, then our transaction. Understanding General Ross's implication, Su Ming politely stated. I can cooperate with you, but a refund, no. General Ross had obviously anticipated Su Ming's attitude. He didn't hold out much hope for a refund either. With 200 million in hand, he wouldn't refund it so easily if he were in Su Ming's shoes. After the refund proposal was rejected, Ross made another suggestion. In that case, Mr. Destiny, let this money be the commission for the next delegation, all right? Want to take advantage of me? Dream on. General Ross thought bitterly. Su Ming considered it for a moment and then agreed to General Ross's proposal. After all, the money had come a bit too easily. However, 2 conditions. Holding up 2 fingers, Su Ming looked at General Ross, smiling like a fox. Immediately contact Nick Fury and tell him that I have completed the military's commission. Also, this money can only be considered a deposit for the next commission. The exact price will depend on the mission content. Crack. A piece of General Ross's newly filled molar broke off. Su Ming, feeling refreshed, was escorted out of the U.S. military base by soldiers driving a Humvee. He watched as the soldiers, seemingly treating him like a plague, avoided him and then sped away as soon as he got out of the vehicle, leaving a trail of dust. Su Ming chuckled. His laughter woke Elisa, who was beside him. Accompanying Su Ming on his trip to Brazil had a strong impact on Elisa's worldview. Not to mention witnessing that destructive, green-skinned giant. Her boss's dealings with the military were never hidden from her. 200 million. OMG. She involuntarily recalled the time she tried to intercept her boss for $2,000. How dare you, Elisa? She shivered involuntarily, grateful that her boss had shown mercy back then, otherwise. She had also witnessed the military personnel drawing blood from her boss. The sharp needles seemed to turn into noodles against her boss's skin, completely unable to penetrate his seemingly soft skin. My boss seems stronger than before. Recalling the scene where she had kicked Su Ming's arm and broken it, Elisa fell into deep thought. This was also why she had become increasingly well-behaved in front of Su Ming recently. Su Ming's suffocating power gave Elisa a sense of looking up at a towering mountain, and at the same time, a hint of distance. Did she still have the courage to flirt with her boss? Elisa was deeply skeptical. Let's go. At this moment, Su Ming's cheerful voice sounded from beside her, and Elisa awoke as if from a dream. My boss will take you to Washington for a stroll. Listening to Su Ming's kind tone and remembering his care for her, Elisa showed a big smile. Strong as he is, my boss is still my boss. He's mine, _. Washington, 3-winged building. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. This time, Su Ming had contacted Nick Fury in advance, so there was no awkward situation like last time when he forced his way into S.H.I.E.L.D. Headquarters, triggering the agent's emergency response. Nick Fury looked at the calm Su Ming in front of him with a complicated expression and sighed heavily. General Ross had called him not long ago. Although he was informed that Su Ming had successfully completed the military's commission, General Ross absolutely refused to transfer the previously agreed upon research funds. He also stated that S.H.I.E.L.D. would no longer be needed as a liaison between the military and Su Ming. Since the money has been spent, of course, the middleman must be cut out. I'll contact him myself from now on. HMPH. General Ross believed his actions were standard procedure. This completely foiled Nick Fury's plan to make a profit in the middle. So, I'm the only one who not only gave away Stark's belongings but also got nothing in return. In fact, not only did old Nick get nothing, but even General Ross, who was known for taking advantage of every opportunity, also got nothing and even lost 200 million. Looking at the conflicted Nick Fury, Su Ming smiled. Director Fury, it's time to fulfill your promise. Nick Fury could only wave his hand helplessly, instructing his subordinates to retrieve all of Howard Stark's belongings from the warehouse and hand them over to Su Ming. Seeing the familiar-looking box beside him, Su Ming knew that as the head of a major organization, Nick Fury would not fail to keep his promise. Thinking of something, he reminded him. The promised contents don't seem to be limited to these, do they? Recalling his solemn promise of a 100 million commission, Nick Fury now wore a pained expression. Why isn't General Ross playing by the rules? Although the higher-ups had invested a lot of funds in his department, he was not a behemoth like the military, which could just conjure up 1 or 200 million. Fury, whose plans had fallen through, was not an indecisive person. He deeply knew Su Ming's strength and knew he absolutely could not create a formidable enemy for the entire department due to a momentary mistake. Gritting his teeth, the money will be transferred as promised. Downstairs, Elisa, pulling a suitcase, felt her heart growing stronger. She once again witnessed her boss effortlessly extort, demand hundreds of millions of dollars with just a few words. If before, when she saw Su Ming earn 200 million, she would exclaim, OMG. Now, seeing the high-ranking official promise to transfer $100 million to Su Ming, she just wanted to say, oh, only 100 million. It wasn't that Elisa was greedy for money, expecting Su Ming to give her a large share. Su Ming was already very generous to her, and her salary was enough for her expenses. Just the experience of seeing the world made Elisa exclaim with excitement. At this moment, her eyes gleamed as she looked at Su Ming, eagerly anticipating where her boss would take her next to reap another harvest. Su Ming looked at the slightly darkening sky and casually said, Elisa, grab your things, let's go get a room. Huh. Hearing Su Ming's words, Elisa's face immediately turned crimson, and her eyes, like water, dared not look at Su Ming. She had a faint expectation in her heart. Has my boss finally come to his senses? Tony Stark had been a bit tired recently. He had just finished a game of chess with the military high command. The military high command held a hearing demanding that he hand over the Iron Man suit and related technology, citing the reason of better protecting the safety of the populace. But the clever Tony didn't buy it and stated that it would take the country at least 20 more years to master this technology. Finally, he directly retorted, I am Iron Man. I and the suit are one. Handing over the Iron Man suit is handing over myself. Are you kidding? Tony knew exactly what those politicians were plotting. He would never hand over the armor technology that had repeatedly helped him resolve crises. Tony remembered the man who had developed a similar reactor to his own, who had wielded a powerful electric whip to attack him at the racetrack but was defeated by his new armor. I need to get to the bottom of this. Arriving at the prison, Tony was curious to know why the other party had attacked him. After listening to Ivan Vanko's account, Tony finally learned about the feud between their two families from the previous generation. Feeling somewhat guilty, Tony kindly reminded Ivan how to improve the reactor before he left. This was actually Tony's way of demonstrating his superior research capabilities as a descendant of the Stark family. By night, the toxin levels in Tony's blood had reached a terrifying 89%. Seeing that there was no cure, Tony decided to completely let loose. He held a party, because he thought it might be his last party. Right. Just have fun. At the party, Tony not only danced in his armor but also demonstrated how to use the restroom inside the armor. To liven up the atmosphere, Tony even fired his palm repulsors for entertainment. But Pepper and Rhodes, who were unaware of Tony's poisoning, were both furious when they saw this scene. Rhodes simply put on the Mark II to stop Tony's impulsive behavior. And facing this final revelry, Tony had no intention of stopping. The two then started fighting, going from downstairs to upstairs. It looked like they were tearing the house apart, and the California Bay villa was reduced to a bare shell in a short time. The farce ended with the two of them clashing their palm laser cannons. An angry Rhodes left Tony, who was slumped on the ground, and flew off to the Air Force Base, deciding to modify the armor. They found Hammer to upgrade the armor's weapons. The next day, Tony was planning to stroll around in his armor, since he only had a few days left to live anyway, why not enjoy it to the fullest? Tony, in his armor, was holding a bucket of fried chicken and had just spotted a giant donut in the distance, intending to lie down in its hole and enjoy his meal. Jarvis suddenly alerted him that Su Ming was calling. Hey, Tony, you're not dead yet, are you? Su Ming's cheerful voice rang out in the Iron Man suit's helmet. Annoying guy, Tony snorted disdainfully. Apparently not, I'm having a blast. What can I do for you, my Lord Silver Duke? Remember that thing I mentioned to you? About helping you deal with the poisoning. Tony still didn't believe Su Ming had any way to help him, until he heard Su Ming's next words. Your father, Howard Stark's belongings are with me, and I'm sure there's something you want in them. The price is negotiable. Tony's spirits lifted, and the fried chicken in his hand dropped to the ground. His eyes, which had originally accepted death, instantly burst forth with the light of survival. In California, at Tony's home. Although Tony didn't know where Su Ming got his father's relics, he was still half skeptical about whether these relics could help him through his difficulties. This doubt grew stronger as Tony looked through the personal belongings his father had left behind. There doesn't seem to be anything useful. This made Tony's mood gradually sink, and he unconsciously looked at Su Ming, who was at ease beside him. What made him so confident about these relics? I really am something, clearly deciding not to trust this bounty hunter with anything other than combat. Even so, who wouldn't grasp at any hope in desperation? Just then, on the projector screen, Tony's father, Howard Stark, called out to the camera. Tony. This attracted Tony's and Su Ming's attention. Elisa did not come with Su Ming for some reason. Howard Stark said seriously on the screen. You are still young, and everything I am doing is paving the way for your future. Howard stated that the technological level of his era was simply incapable of innovating humanity's future. The map I left will bring you new discoveries. Only you can change humanity's future. Hearing this, Tony immediately found the map his father had left. It is worth mentioning that what Su Ming took from S.H.I.E.L.D. at that time was only a small portion of the Stark relics. Large map models and other items were loaded onto a truck and Su Ming requested them to be sent directly to Tony's house. I remembered wrong. Su Ming looked at the opened box on the ground. He thought the important things were in that box, but it only contained a useful videotape. What could truly bring hope to Tony was hidden within the map model. Su Ming looked at the model, which was half the height of a wall, and thought to himself. That's it. Tony keenly sensed that something unusual seemed to be hidden on this map. As if his doubts were resolved, he quickly moved the model to his studio for research. With Jarvis's help, he discovered that an inconspicuous sphere contained an elemental structure he had never seen before. Through analysis, he was pleasantly surprised to find that this new element could not only clear palladium but also serve as a new core for the reactor. I knew only a new element could help me. To detoxify himself, Tony had tried various combinations of existing elements in the scientific community, but none worked. This was also a point of despair for him. This is forcing me to develop a new element. Tony had indeed considered developing a new element, but time simply wouldn't allow it. The appearance of the new elemental structure dispelled the dark clouds that had been weighing on Tony's mind for many days. Tony finally broke into a happy smile. Tony. At this moment, Su Ming spoke, pulling the cheerful Tony back to reality. Tony turned to look at the confident Su Ming, secretly praising him. He's truly a guy who can surprise me. Tony recalled that Su Ming had keenly noticed his predicament long ago and offered to help him solve it, which he had dismissed at the time. He never expected that at the critical moment, Su Ming would actually bring something that would change his destiny. This bounty hunter has something special. Although he seemed to want to kill him when they first met, to be fair, he really was reasonable. Tony felt it was incredibly worth it that he only paid $50 million for his life back then. Recalling his past interactions with Su Ming, he had saved him more than once, and in the end, he just took some money and left. Tony had never met such a good person in his life. Although his competitive nature had made him dislike him at every turn. But Mr. Silver Duke is like a timely rain, always appearing when I am in trouble. What a lovely fellow. Although I, Tony Stark, have never submitted to anyone, how can one not like a player like Mr. Silver Duke who only wants money for doing good deeds? Tony forgot. Su Ming's offer was not low, he just didn't care about it. From this moment on, Tony, who had always been arrogant, developed a good impression of Su Ming. Just as he was about to say something, a wave of pain struck, and the symptoms of palladium poisoning worsened. Tony grunted, and the gray-black stripes on his neck were visible to the naked eye. Hiss. Just then, Su Ming quickly injected some kind of medicine into Tony's neck. Oh, Director Fury of S.H.I.E.L.D. asked me to convey his regards. If Tony hadn't been poisoned, Su Ming would have almost forgotten that before leaving S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury had given him a syringe containing a drug that could delay the symptoms of palladium poisoning. Nick Fury originally wanted to communicate with Tony himself, help him through the poisoning crisis, and then persuade Tony to join the Avengers initiative. However, he had already given the most important Stark relics to Su Ming as a bargaining chip. He also wanted to recruit both Su Ming and Tony into his plan, so he generously handed the medicine to Su Ming. After all, it wasn't an antidote, this drug could only temporarily alleviate the symptoms of palladium poisoning. So, in Nick Fury's eyes, its value was far less than Su Ming and Tony. Ah, what is this? Feeling the sharp pain in his neck, followed by a cool sensation that relieved the recent oppressive symptoms. Tony couldn't help but be curious. Su Ming felt a bit of lingering fear. Luckily, Tony's poisoning in front of him reminded him, otherwise, he would have genuinely forgotten to inject Tony with the medicine. If Tony had suddenly died in the middle of developing the new element, his sin would have been great. Thinking of this, Su Ming was also very straightforward. Tony, this is a medicine specifically developed by S.H.I.E.L.D. to alleviate the symptoms of palladium poisoning. I think this injection should help you last until the new element is successfully developed. I almost forgot. Haha. Tony touched his neck, feeling the strange protrusions from before slowly receding, knowing that what Su Ming had injected him with could indeed help delay his symptoms. While relieved, he also had a complaint. Why didn't you bring out such a good thing earlier? You made me suffer for so many days. But he had genuinely saved his life and ensured he had time to research the new element. Tony would not ignore this kindness. Mr. Silver Duke, I know your rule, 500 million, delivered in full. Stop. Su Ming raised his hand, looking at Tony in surprise. What's going on? I said 500 million, and you didn't agree. Then I flew back and forth between Brazil and Washington, working hard to get the stuff. Now you've confirmed it works, and you still want to get it at the original price. Where do you get such good deals? Can the price of off-plan and completed properties be the same? Tony, I need to remind you, that was the original price. Tony Stark looked at Su Ming's professional smile, knowing his style well. Relax, relax. It's just money, no big deal. But how could the Tsunere Tony be enthusiastic towards a man? Thinking of this, Tony snorted. I'll give you double. 1 billion. At the same time, his eyes kept glancing at the new element's structural diagram, wishing he could dive into it immediately. Su Ming looked at the generous Tony, knowing he was eager to develop the new element. Since he had already offered double the price, it would undoubtedly be annoying to continue haggling at this point. Anyway, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. He wasn't pretentious either. Deal. As soon as he finished speaking, the phone rang, and Elisa's slightly hoarse voice came through. Boss. The military called. There's a commission. Su Ming left Tony's house without even saying goodbye. At this time, Tony made a phone call. He knew that manufacturing this new element would require enormous energy. His current small workshop simply couldn't accomplish it. On the phone, he arranged to purchase a set of ion emission components worth tens of billions, then picked up a large hammer and began renovating his mansion, which was worth hundreds of millions. If Su Ming, who left in a hurry, knew that Tony spent tens of billions just on purchasing equipment, he would probably regret leaving so decisively. Elisa finally got her wish, but she had no idea that Su Ming's streamlined body contained such immense energy. She even thought she was going to die. The sun was high in the sky, yet she still lingered in bed. Her body, which felt like it was about to fall apart, didn't want to move an inch, even under the urging of hunger. She now somewhat regretted teasing Su Ming last night, having thought he would continue to uphold the usual politeness and restraint of an Eastern man. She hadn't expected her boss to get serious, transforming into a wolf, treating her as a delicious meal, and devouring her. Although this outcome was one she had gladly accepted and even long awaited, the problem was she had never considered that Su Ming had infinite stamina. This was truly a torment for Elisa. The peak of pleasure was pain, but she had long since been unable to distinguish whether she was feeling pleasure or pain later on. The result was obvious. Her voice was hoarse, and her body was wrecked. If the military hadn't called to inform her boss of a new mission, she wouldn't have gotten out of bed no matter what. Help me pinpoint the rendezvous location, I'll head over now. Get some good rest. Listening to her boss's energetic voice still assigning her tasks, Elisa angrily threw down the towel in her hand. Did you let me rest? She limped to the desk, opened the computer, and typed furiously on the keyboard. Su Ming received the location information from Elisa, followed by a so sleepy emoji. Recalling last night's events, he shook his head with a chuckle. You played with fire. If Elisa hadn't finally cried and begged him to stop, Su Ming would have seen it through to the end. Following the location information Elisa sent, Su Ming arrived at a secluded street, got into the Humvee General Ross sent to pick him up, and headed straight for the command center. After receiving the data from Betty, Banner prepared to go to Mr. Blue in New York for help. However, he didn't know that he had already been targeted by the military. Fully armed soldiers surrounded him, and Humvee combat vehicles also pursued him. When he realized the situation was dire, he took off running, but how could two legs outrun a four-wheeled vehicle? What will it take for General Ross to finally let me go? Banner's heart was anxious. He just wanted to be an ordinary biologist, but the military's pursuit and encirclement made him feel suffocated. With nowhere else to go, he could only flee into the campus to find a hiding place. However, the soldiers quickly caught up and cornered him on a skybridge. General Ross sneered at the sight. You can't escape. He ordered both sides of the skybridge to be sealed off and tear gas canisters to be thrown inside, attempting to force Banner out. Seeing this, Betty rushed forward desperately, wanting to save him, but was tackled to the ground by a soldier behind her. General Ross didn't care about this. But this scene completely enraged Banner on the bridge. Under the stimulation of the tear gas, his body rapidly expanded, and his skin turned green. His clothes ripped apart, with only his largest pair of pants remaining on his body. General Ross looked at the enraged Hulk, thought of his daughter with her unique taste, and murmured. She will see the truth. That's right, who would want their daughter to be in love with a monster? Hulk shattered the skybridge window with one kick, roaring as he leapt down from the skybridge, vowing to teach these bullying soldiers a lesson. The organized troops immediately opened fire. Whether heavy machine guns or artillery, they seemed so powerless against Hulk's immense strength. He easily overturned armored vehicles, picked up combat vehicles, and smashed them at the soldiers nearby. The heavy Humvee armored vehicles were tossed around like toys in front of Hulk. The soldiers were routed in the face of Hulk's terrifying strength. The so-called industrial civilization seemed so fragile and vulnerable at this moment. Seeing the unfavorable situation, General Ross immediately dispatched Bronsky, who had just undergone serum enhancement. Finally, it's my turn to appear. Bronsky, armed with a grenade launcher, charged at Hulk alone. It's worth mentioning that after the serum enhancement, Bronsky's physical capabilities far exceeded those of ordinary people. When he was just pursuing Banner, he ran at a speed no less than a combat vehicle with just his legs, and his strength also greatly increased. Hulk picked up two deformed armored vehicle doors as weapons, trying to smash the small bug jumping around in front of him. Cool. This is the feeling. Bronsky skillfully dodged the attacks. General Ross, witnessing this scene, looked incredulous. He had thought it a miracle that Bronsky was even alive after the serum, and he hadn't expected him to actually become stronger. My goodness. He really got stronger. Bronsky, relying on his enhanced body, moved around Hulk, trying to find a weakness, but he overlooked Hulk's almost impenetrable defense. Apparently, General Ross, as the commander, also discovered this problem. Suddenly, the general's loud prompt came through the earpiece. Lead him to the sonic cannon. After several rounds of confrontation, Bronsky could only choose to fight while retreating, leading Hulk into the pre-arranged sonic weapon area. This sonic weapon was actually borrowed by the general from Tony. The powerful sound waves instantly knocked Bronsky over and simultaneously suppressed Hulk's movements. Hulk painfully clutched his head, seemingly greatly affected. However, after a temporary adaptation, Hulk struggled to stand up and used the shield in his hand to block some of the sonic attacks. He then threw an armored vehicle door, directly cutting a combat vehicle in half, and then, with a huge leap, smashed another one. Seeing this, Bronsky charged forward alone, issuing a provocation. Is that all you've got? As a result, under Hulk's angry grunt, Bronsky was kicked flying by a front kick, bouncing several times on the ground before hitting a tree. His body was twisted at an incredible angle, he looked like he was done for. Seeing that the ground forces were helpless, General Ross called for armed helicopter support, thinking that even if it meant destroying the school, he would end Hulk here. However, what General Ross didn't notice was that his daughter, Betty, had quietly walked to Hulk's side, attempting to awaken his deeply hidden rationality. But at this moment, the armed helicopters, strafing fire rained down like a torrent. Hulk threw the last piece of vehicle armor, destroying the helicopter. The crashing warplane erupted in flames, instantly engulfing the surroundings, and Hulk immediately shielded Betty tightly in his arms. After the explosion, Hulk gave General Ross a warning roar, then slowly disappeared into the rolling thick smoke, holding Betty. General Ross, who had almost lost his daughter, was now helpless. He frowned deeply and instructed his secretary. Go contact Destiny. When General Ross saw Su Ming again, it was 3 days later. Although something very unexpected had happened in these past few days, Bronski had made a full recovery. He hadn't expected Bronski, whose bones were completely shattered, to recover completely in just 2.5 days. This strengthened his determination to capture Banner. Recalling Hulk's formidable strength, the military's methods seemed to have no effect on him, and even though Bronski became powerful due to the serum injection, he was still no match for Hulk. So he thought of Destiny, the bounty hunter who still owed him a 200 million order. After listening to General Ross's explanation, Su Ming knew that Banner had once again transformed into Hulk and escaped the military's encirclement. It really is no surprise at all. Su Ming knew that Hulk's combat power was top tier even in the entire Marvel universe. The main reason was that his strength could continuously increase with his anger, and the most crucial point was, there was no upper limit. Su Ming vaguely remembered that Hulk seemed to have consumed something in the early stages that limited his power, which led to a bitter struggle when he fought Abomination. Looking at Bronski, who was full of fighting spirit, Su Ming sighed slightly in his heart. This battle maniac will probably become bigger and uglier when we meet again. It seemed that Tony himself had contacted General Ross to stop the military's plan to have Abomination join S.H.I.E.L.D. How could a madman who blindly pursued power be allowed to join a place like S.H.I.E.L.D.? Although power is very important, making money is still more practical. Plus 1 billion. Account balance. 1,303,120,000 United States dollars. The system prompt sounded, and Tony's transfer arrived as promised. Looking at the over 1.3 billion United States dollars in his account, Su Ming's eyes showed a hint of a smile. Not bad, all this running around finally wasn't in vain. At this moment, the military had tracked Betty's phone and bank records, and also monitored Mr. Blue's email by following the clues. General Ross knew that Banner would definitely contact Mr. Blue again if he wanted to cure himself. As expected, Banner's email was intercepted by the military, and they located Mr. Blue. A carefully laid trap was quietly unfolding. Su Ming, on the other hand, was asked by General Ross to be on standby at all times, to assist when they were ready to close the net. Su Ming was noncommittal about this. He watched the military's combat footage, and looking at the mighty Hulk, a question arose in Su Ming's mind. Can I, as I am now, fight the invincible Hulk? Su Ming wasn't too confident about this either. After all, his low-level steel body combined with Deadpool-level recovery only ensured that he was very hard to kill, not that he was undying. With so many contenders possessing strange and unpredictable abilities yet to appear, Su Ming never dared to be blindly optimistic. After all, staying alive was the most basic principle for a transmigrator. The undying body in the system store cost 5 billion, which was not enough to exchange for at the moment. Lying in the lounge provided by the military, Su Ming planned to use this long-awaited quiet time to study the system store and improve his strength. In this ever-changing Marvel universe, personal strength was the foundation of everything. Even with an undying body, being exiled to the edge of the universe or the gap of the microscopic world, he would be as miserable as if he were dead. Su Ming decided to upgrade steel body first. After all, a body that couldn't withstand heavy weapons wasn't really a steel body. Upgrade. Minus 500 million. Upgrade successful. Account balance. 803,120,000 United States dollars. Feeling the subtle changes in his body, Su Ming remembered one thing: flight. Although he could achieve flight now, each time was equivalent to throwing himself out. The drawbacks of this method were exposed as Su Ming used it multiple times. It was too inconvenient in combat. When he was fighting Ironmonger in the air, every time he changed position or accelerated, he had to throw a flying knife and use its inertia to achieve it. Too much trouble. Was there a way to make himself fly without such effort? With this question, Su Ming browsed the system store. Superman's biological field was undoubtedly the best choice, but it was expensive. Can't afford it. Ways of flying using technology like Tony's, such as giving himself a pair of wings, or a rocket device. This belonged to the realm of technology, the system store didn't have it. It could only exchange for abilities in the talent aspect. There were indeed talents that could give him wings. Vampire right-pointing arrow bat transformation. 300 million USD. But this. Imagining himself transforming into a bat and flying around, Su-Ming decisively shook his head. He didn't know if it was his imagination, but he always felt this ability had a very stealthy feel. Besides, how fast could a bat fly? And how could he fight after transforming? Pass. Flight magic right-pointing arrow magic broom, 80 million USD. Riding a broom. Su-Ming imagined himself straddling a broom and flying in the sky, and compared to Tony's Iron Man armor's flight method, it was pathetic. It was even worse than throwing flying knives. Forget the broom. Doctor Who right-pointing arrow time vortex travel, 20 billion United States dollars. This seemed very powerful, but not only could he not afford it, it seemed to be a skill leaning towards the profit direction. Wrong direction. Pass. Su-Ming calmed down and thought carefully about what other ways, besides Superman's biological field, could allow him to fly gracefully. With a thought, Su-Ming saw a talent. Magneto right-pointing arrow magnetic control, 20 million United States dollars. His eyes lit up, and Su-Ming thought of that powerful old man. It seemed he could also move freely in the air. That's right. Thinking from another angle can also work. If he could have footholds and points of force in the air at any time, just like on the ground. Wouldn't the sky be flat ground? That's the one. Exchange. Minus 20 million United States dollars. Acquired talent magnetic control LV1, 999 milligrams magnetic force. Account balance 783,120,000 United States dollars. Looking at the upgrade interface for magnetic control, Su-Ming secretly thought, as expected. How could Magneto's kingly method be obtained for a mere 20 million? Magnetic control LV2, 999 grams magnetic force 80 million USD. Magnetic control LV3, 999 kilograms magnetic force 200 million USD. Magnetic control LV4, 999 tons magnetic force 500 million USD. Magnetic control LV5, 999 kilotons magnetic force 5 billion United States dollars. Magnetic control also had levels, but Su-Ming felt that being able to have it by spending money was too cost-effective. Looking at other talents, it seemed upgrading magnetic control had a higher cost-performance ratio. Upgrade. Minus 780 million United States dollars, talent upgrade successful. Account balance. 3,120,000 United States dollars. Opened the attribute panel. Name. Su-Ming. Age. 28 inches. Physical strength. 2,255 inches. Current account. 3.12 million United States dollars. Existing talents. Deadpool level recovery, dynamic vision LV.2, Jeet Kune Do mastery, constitution enhancement LV4, faceless mask, precise throwing LV2, sketching mastery, steel body LV4, magnetic control LV 4 inches. Looking at the 9 talents he had accumulated without realizing it, Su-Ming deeply understood what was more precious than money. These are all my capital for future ventures. Attempting to use magnetic control. Steel bars suddenly peeled away from the walls around the lounge, looking as if they were combining into a formation. Boom. Without the support of the steel bars, the roof of the lounge collapsed easily like building blocks stacked by a child. Swish. Su-Ming flashed outside, looking at the military building he had accidentally collapsed, and quietly stuck out his tongue. Magneto truly deserved to be a big shot, this ability was too heaven-defying. Only 999 tons of magnetic force was at most a 100 magnet. Little king, yet even so, the destructive power was too astonishing. How much force would it take for Magneto to easily lift a cruise ship from the sea? What happened? Enemy attack. Where's my gun? A group of soldiers rushed out of the room, their faces panicked, looking around. The loud noise of the collapsing house made them think the base was under attack. General Ross had just walked out of the command center when he was covered in dust, coughing a few times, looking at the collapsed house, his eyebrows twitching in anger. They actually cut corners on my military's building. Looking at the panicked soldiers, he couldn't contain his anger and roared. It's just a collapsed house, why are you all panicking? Get back to what you were doing. Scram. Then he called his adjutant. Go, bring back everyone who was involved in building this house. I'm going to punish them severely. The adjutant received the order and scurried off to cause trouble for those innocent architects. General Ross took the towel handed to him by his secretary, wiped the dust from his face, and walked over to Su-Ming. Mr. Destiny, That seemed to be where you were just resting. Are you all right? A greeting was about to come out when he saw Su Ming looking clean and tidy, and instantly paused. Recalling his abnormal body, General Ross secretly thought. I'm so stupid, even if everyone in the entire base died, he wouldn't be harmed. He glanced at the collapsed house again, snorted coldly, and turned to go back to the command center. Su Ming watched the scene unfold with amusement, knowing that General Ross had misunderstood. Although he sympathized with those architects whose futures were uncertain, he had no intention of explaining for them. Silently looking at his hands, Su Ming sighed. Regarding this newly acquired ability, it seems he'll need some time to adapt to it again. Accompanied by Betty, Banner found Mr. Blue, whom he had known for a long time. As a doctor of biology, Mr. Blue also owned a laboratory himself, located in Harlem, New York. Banner looked at Mr. Blue, who was amazed by his bizarre experience and was talking non-stop, and remained silent for a long time. If it were him, he probably wouldn't be so excited. Combining the experimental data Banner brought, Mr. Blue stated that he had found a way to suppress Hulk. Banner. Then what are you waiting for? Mr. Blue injected a can of purple liquid onto the operating table, had Banner lie on the experimental table, and secured his body. To ensure the effectiveness of the antidote, Mr. Blue decided to give Banner some stimulation, the electric shock therapy of the great internet addiction clearance technique. The intense stimulation instantly swept through Banner's entire body, his heart rate soared to its peak, and Hulk's power stirred within him, as if it could burst out at any moment. Banner's skin gradually turned dark green, and his bones made cracking sounds, looking as if they were about to fall apart. Just at this critical moment, Betty bravely climbed onto Hulk's massive body, awakening a trace of Hulk's sanity. Her action bought Mr. Blue precious time to inject the antidote. As the purple liquid flowed in, Hulk gradually calmed down until he fell unconscious, and his body slowly transformed back into Banner's appearance. The experiment was successful. However, Mr. Blue stated bluntly that he could not guarantee whether Hulk was permanently eradicated or temporarily suppressed. To be safe, he secretly copied a large number of Banner's blood samples, intending to continue his research. But what he didn't know was what kind of crisis his actions would bring to the world. Just as Banner and Mr. Blue were arguing about immediately destroying these samples, the military had surrounded them. The sniper was ordered to shoot, accurately injecting anesthetic into Banner from a distance. Bronski took the opportunity to rush into the laboratory, grabbing Banner and questioning him. Where is he? Slap, slap. A few slaps could not make Hulk appear, which made Bronski extremely frustrated. He had dreamed of fighting Hulk for hundreds more rounds until he defeated him, but now the person was right in front of him, yet it wasn't the one he wanted to see, which almost drove Bronski mad. Soon, Banner was taken away by the military, leaving Mr. Blue alone to face the military scientist's questioning. At this moment, Bronski knocked out the scientist from behind. His goal was not to save Mr. Blue, but to crave power like Hulk's. The scene in Mr. Blue's laboratory gave him a glimmer of hope. Perhaps I can become stronger. Bronski pointed a gun at Mr. Blue's head. You can suppress him, and you can certainly create him. Bronski knew that even after being modified by the super soldier serum, his own strength alone was still no match for Hulk. I want what you extracted from Banner. Oh, it seems you also injected something. Mr. Blue believed that Banner's mutation was a gift from nature, and he wanted to continue this research, and the person in front of him seemed to share his idea. Thus, Bronski and Mr. Blue hit it off, deciding to use gamma rays again to inject Banner's blood into Bronski. Sure enough, under the massive gamma ray radiation, Bronski's body rapidly swelled and became terrifyingly abnormal. Abomination was born. Mr. Blue looked at the violent and evil Abomination and realized that something was wrong, speaking out to stop him. I can cure you. But what he got in return was a casual wave from Abomination. The immense force made Mr. Blue hit the wall and fall to the ground, and at this moment, a drop of Hulk's blood sample dripped onto Mr. Blue's wound. Regardless, Mr. Blue's head was infected with Banner's blood, causing a mutation that completely changed his destiny. Bronski, having gained terrifying power, transformed into Abomination and wreaked havoc in the streets of Harlem. Haha, this is the power I want. When had the military ever seen this newly appeared monster? To protect the civilians, they launched an attack on him. But rocket launchers were like toys in his hands and had no effect at all. Give me a stronger opponent. Abomination roared while slaughtering soldiers and civilians. At this moment, Su Ming was sitting in the corner of General Ross's command plane, watching Banner successfully captured by the military. He initially thought it wouldn't be his turn to act, but unexpectedly, another giant, Abomination, appeared out of nowhere, giving General Ross a headache. No rush. No rush. Being too eager isn't a good business strategy. Su Ming dismissed the idea of drumming up business, because every time he had actively sought business before, he had not gotten satisfactory results. So he decided to continue observing. General Ross's heart was filled with a herd of alpacas running wild at this moment. He didn't expect that after successfully capturing Banner, another monster would appear. General Ross, who had commanded troops against Hulk, knew deeply that the military was no match for such a monster. Moreover, they were currently in the streets of New York, and if thousands of innocent civilians were put in danger due to his decision-making error, then his time as a general would be over. Unconsciously, he looked towards Destiny behind him. This hateful fellow showed no reaction at all, as if he didn't care about the innocent civilians suffering and wailing under the monster's rampage. He still owed him a 200 million commission. Just as General Ross was about to open his mouth to ask Su Ming to act, Banner, who had been awake for a long time, spoke up. Let me try. Banner couldn't bear to see so many innocent people die at the hands of the tyrannical monster, and it seemed that Hulk, after he transformed, could stop his destruction. After a battle between man and nature, Banner for the first time felt that Hulk within him was not so unacceptable. But Betty pulled him back. She knew that Banner had just been injected with the antidote, and whether he could awaken Hulk again was an unknown. What was the difference between rushing up now and committing suicide? But Banner at this moment believed that no one else could solve the current problem except himself. He resolutely kissed Betty goodbye and leapt out of the plane's hatch. As Banner plummeted, he suddenly opened his eyes, and his body showed no change at all, making him feel uneasy. Oh, shit, that's right, he was about to fall to his death. Just when everyone thought Banner was doomed, a huge fist suddenly emerged from the ground, followed by Hulk bursting out of the earth. The near-death stimulation successfully awakened Hulk's consciousness, and Banner's life was saved. And Abomination also sensed Hulk's presence, accelerating his charge towards Hulk, vowing to avenge his past humiliation. The two giants leapt into the air almost simultaneously, engaging in a fierce battle. However, due to the suppression of the serum, Hulk's power was greatly diminished. In just one encounter, he was thrown away by Abomination. Even though Hulk launched a counterattack, Abomination easily withstood it and kicked Hulk away. Clearly, Hulk was in a passive position, taking a beating. The antidote he had just been injected with seemed to have a much stronger effect on Hulk's power than imagined. Watching Hulk's tenacious fight on the monitor, Betty shed tears of distress. But General Ross was not considering these things. He initially thought that the successfully transformed Banner could deal with the new monster. After all, he had personally experienced his abnormal strength. But looking at Abomination, who was clearly stronger than Hulk, his years of experience commanding battles told him that now was not the time to hold back. If one Hulk wasn't enough, what about adding a Destiny? General Ross finally looked directly at Su Ming, who at this moment was already drowsy, as if the external changes had nothing to do with him. Hey, Mr. Destiny, do you remember our agreement about the commission? Su Ming snapped back to attention, seeing General Ross looking at him seriously. Did he say anything to me just now? That's right, Su Ming had actually fallen asleep just now. Seeing Su Ming's bewildered eyes, General Ross spoke again. Mr. Destiny, it's your turn to enter the arena. What? Oh, hold on, General Ross. Su Ming knew that at this stage, it was still the initial awakening period for various superheroes. Although the Abomination below looked intimidating, in the early stages, he was at most an elite monster, not even a boss. If this were later, the Hulk, Thunder God Thor, or a technologically mature Tony could easily handle him. Now that he controlled 999 tons of magnetic control, dealing with an Abomination or an early-stage Hulk with reduced power shouldn't be a problem. When he saw the Abomination rampaging through the streets, he had already made up his mind. If General Ross brought it up, he would first clarify, each has its own price. Only then did he feel at ease enough to doze off for a while. Honestly, the helicopter's swaying was quite hypnotic. Su Ming knew that even if he didn't intervene, Banner would step up. This was the climax of the original story. The reason he followed was that neither the Abomination nor the Hulk were individuals the military could handle. While fulfilling the agreement for the 200 million deposit, he also wondered if he could find an opportunity to fleece the military again. Just then, General Ross, who had been observing the battle for a long time, gradually lost confidence in the Hulk defeating the Abomination and sought out Su Ming. Only then did Su Ming tell General Ross to wait. But what General Ross couldn't understand was, what did wait mean? Below, the civilians were in chaos, and the death toll was soaring. How long did he expect him to wait? Was this hateful bounty hunter seeing that the opponents below were too strong, worried he wasn't a match, and planning to renege on the deal? His slightly respectful expression gradually turned cold, and he narrowed his eyes. Destiny, are you going to renege? Su Ming was startled, looking at the General Ross who was about to explode, then glanced at the Hulk being pummeled by the abomination on the monitor. Only then did he realize that General Ross seemed to be worried he would desert. He shook his head speechlessly. General Ross, you misunderstood. I wanted to ask, which of those two guys down there do you want to deal with? Or, do you want both of them taken out? General Ross's eyes instantly widened at the words, his serious expression completely gone, replaced by an incredulous look. How dare you? He understood Su Ming's words but couldn't comprehend them. This bounty hunter actually had the audacity to present those two terrifying monsters below to him like commodities. And even offered him a choice. Had the Hulk's fists become soft? Or had the abomination's bone spikes become dull? Or perhaps, was there a defective brain inside your special body, Destiny? In General Ross's eyes, Su Ming's words had far exceeded the realm of bragging, they were simply nonsensical. General Ross didn't know where Su Ming got his confidence, but looking at the apocalyptic scene in the street below, as a high-ranking military official, he had to do something, otherwise, he couldn't escape responsibility. Not to mention thinking about entering the core of power. With the idea of giving it a try, he said to Su Ming. Whatever it takes, stop this farce. Do I understand this correctly? This mission is to take care of the big gray one down there. Su Ming pondered, confirming the mission objective for General Ross. That's right. General Ross no longer cared about his super soldier project, the situation was escalating beyond his control and imagination. He only hoped to bring this farce to an end as quickly as possible. $500 million. General Ross. Including the previous $200 million, you only need a mere $300 million to meet your request. This offer is not to be missed. Sir. Su Ming said with a smile, words that instantly drove General Ross crazy. Over my dead body. General Ross turned away in anger, no longer bothering with Su Ming, this opportunist, and loudly ordered his subordinates to fire at the target. Fire. Click. The gun bolt was pulled, the airborne Gatling rounds were chambered, aimed at the abomination on the ground. Fire. The muzzle fire was over a meter long. Boom 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 boom. The abomination, in the midst of battle, was intoxicated by his current power, unable to extricate himself. Oh, are cars really such light things? Artillery seems to be just for show. Watching the soldiers who shot at him being flattened by a swung truck, a feeling of arrogant pleasure boiled and bubbled in the abomination's gray chest. You are all ants. Unlike the enraged Hulk after transformation, the abomination, though massive, still maintained a clear mind. Recalling the pain of having all his bones shattered by a single kick from the Hulk before, the abomination prepared to deliver a brutal blow to the Hulk next. Suddenly, the helicopter's intense gunfire interrupted the abomination's attack rhythm. The large caliber bullets clearly caused him no injury. The moment he turned his head, he saw a familiar figure, General Ross. The cruel smile made the abomination's grotesque appearance even more terrifying. A hint of disdain appeared in his eyes. He agilely scaled the building to the roof, leapt, and hung onto the helicopter with one hand. Now, I am the apex predator. His immense weight caused the helicopter to shake violently. The helicopter pilot shouted a warning. Prepare for forced landing. Su Ming, whose negotiations with General Ross had broken down, had intended to sleep a little longer, but the roaring machine guns, the shouting giants, and the grumbling General Ross annoyed him greatly. It wasn't until the violent shaking completely shattered his hope of another nap that Su Ming finally lost his temper. Everyone, stop. Chapter 51. With a wave of both hands, magnetic control suddenly expanded. Buzz. Silence. Unlike the previous moment's clamor, the helicopter was now enveloped in silence, even the engine's sound abruptly ceased. The rotating helicopter blades stopped mid-air. The bullets fired from the Gatling stopped mid-air. Even the powerless helicopter stopped mid-air. Everyone on the helicopter, including the abomination and the Hulk hanging below, witnessed a miraculous scene, as if time had stopped. Actually, no, people were just stunned by surprise. Didn't you see the abomination's body still swinging below the helicopter due to inertia? It was just that the abomination's heavy body could no longer make the helicopter shake even an inch. It was Su Ming who activated magnetic control, fixing all the metal around him. Go fight somewhere else. With a raise of his hand, the bullets in the air and countless metals from nearby rooftops flew up one after another, transforming and reassembling in the air into a giant iron plate larger than the abomination. Su Ming was a bit unhappy that the new order had fallen through. Bang! With an impatient wave of his hand, like shooing away a few flies, the large iron plate in midair, like a fly swatter, smacked the abomination and the Hulk. Two big green flies, sending them flying far away, plummeting to the ground, creating two large craters and raising rolling dust. Silence. Everyone stared blankly at Su Ming, not knowing what method he had used to achieve such a feat. And Su Ming's thoughts at this moment were. It finally got quiet, and he wasn't sleepy anymore. He wondered if anyone understood this feeling. General Ross had just been convinced that Su Ming was a swindler who relied on his special physique to extort money everywhere. Until he saw the scene before him, the old heart of General Ross, the Thunderbolt General, incooperatively twitched twice. Is this something a human can do? Then, a resentment rose in his eyes as he stared at Su Ming. If you had told me you were this powerful earlier, would I be in such a passive situation now? Meanwhile, far away in Washington, the black-shelled Director Fury had a sudden realization, a thought flashing through his mind. General Ross wouldn't think Su Ming as a weakling, would he? That would be too completely blind. Coming back to his senses, General Ross roared internally. I was completely blind. Since this destiny was personally recommended to me by the Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he must have his unique qualities. Recalling what Nick Fury had told him earlier. General Ross, this is not an ordinary bounty hunter. General Ross was a bit frantic. Why didn't you tell me he was this strong earlier? What do I do now? Recalling how he had just unhesitatingly rejected Su Ming's proposal. General Ross regretted it. The fighter pilot had never seen anything so miraculous. He was clearly piloting the plane, yet he was attacked by a giant monster. But what shocked him most was that even with the giants shaking, the plane only swayed for an instant before stabilizing in midair. I swear to God, I didn't do it. The pilot would repeat this sentence every time he recalled the incident later. Indeed, with the plane suspended in the air, who else but the pilot could control the entire fuselage? This was an absolutely logical inference. But something illogical precisely happened. The pilot clearly saw the plane's engine suddenly cut out on the dashboard, which meant they would be forced to land. The system-trained pilot instantly ran through the operating procedures in his mind, but when he tried to perform certain actions, he was stunned once again. The altimeter showed no change in the plane's altitude. His physical sensation even told him that the plane was as stable as if it were parked on the ground. But looking at the dashboard, where even the emergency lights had gone out, the pilot really wanted to say. Unless it's a miracle. Otherwise, even I wouldn't believe everything that's happening. Even an Apache helicopter loaded with weapons and combat command modules did not exceed 10 tons in weight. This weight was like a toy under Su Ming's level 4 magnetic control, but fortunately, he had no other operations, only stabilizing the plane in midair. With Su Ming's current level of magnetic control, it would be very difficult to perform other more delicate operations. General Ross, as expected of an old hand who had been in politics for many years, had a thick skin that even Su Ming greatly admired. The old man diligently approached Su Ming and kindly said, My Lord Destiny, perhaps I didn't express myself clearly just now. Because I was thinking whether 500 million was worthy of your personal intervention. How about this? I'll take a small advantage, still 500 million. Deal with that big gray fellow. Additionally, I will personally hire you as a special consultant to the U.S. Army. The military will prioritize cooperation with you for any matters. The price is negotiable. Su Ming looked at General Ross with surprise at his completely different attitude. The change was truly smooth. He even wanted to take the opportunity to raise the price but couldn't get a word in. Although he didn't fleece them, having a job and making money, and being able to connect with the military who are not short of money, was also a good outcome. Su Ming stood up and stretched his body. Crack, 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 crack. A series of bone-cracking sounds echoed through the plane. My honor, General. Just as Su Ming's gaze searched for Abomination, preparing to rush towards him, General Ross quietly said in Su Ming's ear. My Lord Destiny, Banner, Hulk, could you please also help me capture him back? Oh, this old man is very bad. Banner just jumped out of the plane alone to help you out, enduring Abomination, and now you still want to capture him back for research. It seems Ross is still not giving up on his plan. Su Ming heard this and smiled politely. Sorry, General, that's a different price. With that, his gaze locked onto Abomination. He leapt, and left the plane. Not long after Su Ming left the plane suddenly changed. For no other reason than the person controlling the plane's suspension in the air had left, the plane's engine had stalled, and repeated attempts to restart it failed. The plane began to freefall. Everyone instinctively let out exclamations. Su Ming, flying towards Abomination, heard the panicked shouts behind him, suddenly remembered that he was controlling the plane, and quickly transformed several throwing knives into a crude platform for himself to stand on. He raised his hand and remotely controlled the plane's descent, which became slower and slower, until it landed somewhat unsteadily on the rooftop. Thud. Su Ming's unfamiliarity with magnetic control directly caused the plane to lose control about 5 meters from the rooftop, crashing straight down. Fortunately, There were no casualties. Having dealt with the plane, Su Ming finally had time to turn his gaze back to the grayish-white giant figure, Abomination. At this moment, Hulk was still wrestling with Abomination, exchanging blows, but was always at a disadvantage. That's right, Hulk's inverse scale, Betty Ross, was well protected by him, completely failing to ignite Hulk's protective instincts and combat power in a crisis, so it was already good that he could hold on until now. Never mind Hulk for now, the target of the commission is Abomination. This guy has considerable strength and strong recovery abilities, truly an enhanced version of Ironmonger. This once again made Su Ming think about wanting to test his skills. Leaping down from the metal plate, Su Ming decided to test the water first. Abomination was surprised, doubtful, and excited after being slapped away by the large iron plate. Where did this mysterious master come from? Although the large iron plate didn't cause him any harm, the immense force was real, which ignited Abomination's desire to fight. Unlike Hulk's instinctive fighting in anger, Abomination possessed Bronski's rationality. His confidence inflated, he had already set his new target to defeat Su Ming. He wanted to defeat this mysterious strong man. He wanted to prove he was the strongest. But the constantly charging Hulk annoyed him. You are no longer my opponent. He kicked Hulk away. Where are you? The guy who controlled the plane. I want to challenge you. Just then, a figure whistled as it rushed towards Abomination. Heard you were looking for me. Before he finished speaking, Su Ming's descending punch, imbued with immense power, struck Abomination's chest. Boom. Abomination's huge body became a cannonball, flung back nearly 2 blocks before stopping, having smashed through countless walls. Su Ming focused his gaze, his supervision rapidly zooming in on Abomination's chest. On his battered body, a fist-sized hole was gushing blood, surrounded by a roughly half-meter circular fist-shaped crater, which was visibly recovering. Su Ming hadn't expected that using 50% of his current body's strength would only cause him minor injuries. Cannot underestimate the heroes of the world. With that thought, Su Ming drew a throwing knife, channeled all his strength, turned, and threw it. Using 80% of his strength. He had tried before. The throwing knife would shatter when he used his full strength. Whoosh. The throwing knife, carrying immense kinetic energy, pierced through 3 atmospheric sound barriers, exceeding the speed of sound, flying towards its target. The blade rapidly eroded during its high-speed flight. Until it pierced Abomination's shoulder, bringing out a large amount of blood. Abomination's chest had just recovered when his shoulder was instantly pierced by a glowing red, fragmented throwing knife, the subsequent force pushing Abomination back dozens of steps. Finally, after crushing a dozen large pits in the ground, Abomination completely resisted the force of the throwing knife. But the transparent hole the throwing knife left on Abomination's shoulder quickly healed visibly. This made Su Ming exclaim, truly high defense, thick health, and fast recovery. Thinking of this, Su Ming stopped using throwing knives. He was ready to test the hardness of his steel body. So he stood still, no longer moving, quietly waiting for Abomination to attack. Abomination was extremely disheveled by the sudden attack, tumbling hundreds of meters disoriented, and was ambushed just as he got up. Fortunately, although this attack was fierce, it did not target vital points, and his own recovery ability was also very good. This reassured Abomination quite a bit. How could a battle maniac be content to just take hits without retaliating? He started a running start hundreds of meters away, and by the time he reached Su Ming, he was like a high-speed train. Clang. Abomination swung his fist in a full circle, directly hitting Su Ming's upper body, emitting a loud clang of metal impact. Su Ming, who took the punch head-on, was pushed straight back by the immense kinetic energy, his feet plowing deep furrows in the ground. Got some power. Feeling the distinct impact on his body, Su Ming nodded, giving a slight acknowledgement to Abomination's strength. Abomination, however, showed an expression of looking at a monster, because his hand bones had just shattered from the impact of that punch. It wasn't until he clearly saw the figure he had sent flying that Abomination's pupils sharply contracted. It's him. Abomination recognized Su Ming's appearance, and a look of surprise and doubt appeared in his eyes. When he was not yet Abomination, Bronski had witnessed Su Ming's abnormal physique. He originally thought that Su Ming's only characteristic was his toughness, and he always believed that Hulk's strength was greater. He never expected that Su Ming's body, which looked no different from an ordinary person's, would possess such formidable power. He had just been sent flying with a single blow. And there was that thing that pierced his body, he didn't know what it was. Moreover, his own attacks seemed to have no effect. How is this possible? Astonished by Su Ming's strength, but how could Abomination, who had just gained new life, be willing to be inferior to a yellow-skinned monkey? It should be known that Bronski, being an elite soldier, actually looked down on people of other skin colors deep down. That unwillingness to admit defeat instantly dominated Abomination's thoughts. Now he had only one thought: to tear apart all the enemies in front of him. I am the strongest. He roared and charged towards Su Ming, turning to unleash a whip-like punch, the bone spurs on the back of his arm growing fiercely with the force of the punch, vowing to smash and pierce everything they touched. On the other hand, Su Ming, with his superior vision and spider sense, knew that more and more fearless reporters and media were continuously approaching the core area of the battle. Is it really worth risking your life for some first-hand information? He sighed while putting on his mask. He didn't want to be like Tony, whose identity was so well known despite being so minor. In an instant, his entire demeanor underwent a drastic change. At this moment, Abomination's attack came whistling. Su Ming ducked and dodged, then threw an uppercut straight at Abomination's chin. Due to the huge height difference, Su Ming maintained the uppercut motion and had to leap high to reach Abomination's head. Sure, you can. Boom. A dull thud echoed as the fist collided with the chin, and Abomination's entire body was lifted off the ground by the immense force, crashing through the wall of the adjacent office building. Boom. Crash, bang. General Ross had already arranged for soldiers to restore the battle footage broadcast. When he saw Su Ming completely transform just by putting on a mask, he suddenly realized. So it's him. He slapped his thigh, then began to complain. If Nick Fury had told me earlier that Destiny was Scarlet Silver Duke, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. Leaving aside General Ross recognizing Su Ming as the famous Mr. Silver Duke. After taking Su Ming's Shoryuken, Abomination got up, seeing stars. This guy's strength doesn't seem to match his hardness. As a battle maniac, Abomination constantly analyzed various intelligence discovered during combat. At this moment, he found that compared to his abnormally tough body, Su Ming's strength didn't seem particularly outstanding. It was only on par with Hulk. This discovery invigorated Abomination. Speaking of Hulk, everyone can't help but ask, where did this guy go? Yes, he did run away. Seeing Su Ming forcefully join the battle and gain the upper hand, Hulk's desire to fight plummeted. He was inherently a peace-loving individual. Hulk had tried to stop Abomination when he climbed onto the plane. Betty is on the plane. If anything happens to her, I might go crazy. It wasn't until he and Abomination were both sent flying by a large metal plate, away from Betty, that Hulk's suspended heart finally settled. Banner in Hulk form could not maintain enough rationality. His mind was focused on only one thing: protecting Betty. He knew that staying here might lead to him being targeted again, or cause more trouble for Betty. Seeing Abomination being suppressed in front of Su Ming, Hulk turned and ran, his green figure disappearing into the night in a flash. No one knew where he went. The scene shifts. When Abomination realized that Su Ming's strength was far less abnormal than his body's hardness, he couldn't help but feel a bit more confident. He recalled the scene of encircling Hulk back then, and mimicking Hulk, he tore a military armored vehicle in half. Then he held the armored plates as weapons and shields in his hands. His gaze flickered, locking onto Su Ming's figure. Who is this masked person? His thoughts raced, and when he clearly saw the familiar clothes on the body beneath the mask, he finally reacted. If you're going to fight, why wear a mask like that? After identifying the target, he charged forward, while a hint of doubt arose in his mind. This mask feels a bit familiar. Locking onto the approaching figure, Abomination cleared his mind of distractions, raised the armored plates high in his hands, and with a powerful overhead strike, vowed to cleave Su Ming in two. Looking at the armored steel plates hurtling towards his face, Su Ming just wanted to say one thing. Of all things to pick up, why a piece of iron? As Su Ming's eyes changed in an inexplicable way, an invisible ripple emanated from his body. Stop. Pointing at the two armored plates, Su Ming blurted out a, stop, incantation. The ripple flashed, and the armored plates in Abomination's hands abruptly halted in midair. Buzz. What happened on the plane happened again. The sudden stop of the plates in his hands almost made Abomination stumble badly. Abomination, steadying himself, looked at his palms in disbelief, then looked up at the armored plates suspended in midair. He was dumbfounded. What's going on? He had been puzzled earlier. An Apache's load capacity wouldn't exceed 10 tons. He and Hulk had both climbed on, so why didn't the helicopter crash? Not only did it not crash, but it remained suspended in the air as steadily as if on flat ground, just like the two armored plates in front of him, perfectly still in the air. This phenomenon was beyond Abomination's comprehension. Su Ming was actually using the battle to familiarize himself with his newly acquired talent, magnetic control. Whether it was a plane or a deck, making them stay in the air was a very easy task. But achieving the same flexible and versatile control over metal as Magneto was Su Ming's next challenge. This feeling was like holding a pen, others could write various calligraphic art words, while you could only scribble wildly. Su Ming instinctively raised his hand towards the huge armored plates in the air, imagining them transforming into the shapes in his mind. The huge armored vehicle plates were undergoing irregular deformations in the air. Abomination suddenly realized that the opponent's attention was elsewhere, and standing still was a good opportunity for him to launch an attack. You're not the only one who can use weapons. He picked up a car from the roadside and threw it fiercely at Su Ming, wanting to flatten this annoying guy. 1, 2. In the blink of an eye, several cars of different models were thrown at Su Ming's head. Among them was even a garbage truck emitting a strong sour smell. Su Ming was thinking of shaping the armored plates into a giant Fangtian halberd, imagining the magnificent scene in his mind, like a celestial being manifesting, which would surely be a very impressive move. But seeing the cars flying frequently, Su Ming raised his other hand and casually pointed, "Stop again." The several cars thrown by Abomination instantly halted in midair, motionless. Splash. Although the cars stopped in midair, the trash inside the garbage truck spilled everywhere, and foul swill splattered everywhere, even on Su Ming's legs. This made Su Ming's eye twitch involuntarily. Don't foreigners sort their trash? Su Ming, who had originally intended to create a cool weapon, got angry. Since I can't make a cool one, I'll make a big one. With a clap of his hands, the increasing number of vehicles in the air instantly gathered into a mass. In a flash, it transformed into an irregularly shaped club, which whistled as it smashed towards Abomination under Su Ming's control. Abomination was still diligently throwing cars when he suddenly noticed a dark shadow gradually enveloping his body. What the? The cars he had just thrown violently deformed in the air and converged into that giant club-shaped object, making it thicker, bigger. When he saw the 3-story-high iron tower slamming down on him, only one thought remained in Abomination's mind. Run. The streets of Hamley district were deserted at this time. Only the cameras hidden in the shadows occasionally emitted a few dazzling flashes of white light. The gray, hideous giant let out an angry roar, and if one listened carefully, a hint of panic could be discerned. Dozens of media reporters hidden in the corners captured a scene they would never forget. A bizarrely shaped but massive metallic amalgamation plummeted from the sky towards the culprit who had laid waste to the street, Abomination. More than a dozen cars, under Su Ming's powerful magnetic control, were crushed into a giant club, large at one end, small at the other, and extremely irregular in shape. It smashed down on Abomination with the force of a collapsing mountain. I told you not to litter. As Su Ming's arm fell heavily, the massive metal tower suddenly accelerated, engulfing Abomination's attempting to escape figure. Boom. The ground vibrated violently, and the people hiding in their homes hugged each other, trembling and begging God for forgiveness. Did the military use missiles? People who didn't understand guessed wildly about the cause of the tremor. The smoke and dust cleared. On the wide road, a large, ugly, unidentified object was deeply embedded in the ground, with only a small part exposed. If one looked closely, one could still see that it was composed of various compressed and deformed cars. It was Su Ming's first time controlling so much metal, and it was evident that the processing was very crude. The chaotic street had now returned to quiet. The adjutant, who had been observing the battle from afar, saw that the fighting had ceased and threw a walkie-talkie to Su Ming. Destiny, oh my God, you were Mr. Silver Duke all along. General Ross's annoyed voice came through the walkie-talkie. Didn't Nick Fury tell you? Su Ming realized that General Ross hadn't known his identity from the beginning and secretly gave Nick Fury a big thumbs up. Good job, my black egg buddy. You're reliable. General Ross seemed to have been reminded of something sad, muttering a couple of things Su Ming didn't catch. I wish he had told me from the start. Then he asked about the situation of the battle. How is it? Is it handled? Su Ming didn't know how effective this impromptu ultimate move was, so he didn't answer the general's question, reaching his hand towards the metal mixture on the ground. As his ability activated, the huge iron block firmly embedded in the ground vibrated, slowly rising into the air, revealing the scene beneath the ground. One could see that the sewer pipes and communication cables were shattered into a mess by the giant object, with water spraying and sparks flying. After a moment of searching, Su Ming finally saw Abomination's figure. It was a bit miserable. At this moment, Abomination's huge body was firmly embedded in the ground in an irregular shape, and the bone spurs behind his elbows had even pierced into his own body. People usually refer to this state as face planting. Looking at his face, his unfocused eyes were still struggling to stay open, but his wide open mouth and the white foam at the corners of his mouth somewhat diminished Abomination's might. The soldiers, under the general's command, stepped forward to confirm the target's status. Reporting, General, the target is not dead, temporarily unconscious. The soldier reported loudly, and this result finally relieved General Ross. The surrounding media reporters, like flies discovering carrion, swarmed over with a buzzing sound. Cameras of various models flashed back and forth on General Ross and Su Ming's faces, mainly focusing on Su Ming. After all, people hadn't seen Mr. Silver Duke appear in the public eye for a long time. They naturally wanted to ask Su Ming a question: where is your crimson suit? Someone indeed loudly asked Su Ming the question, and not just one. Su Ming looked at the military-issued but unmarked army training uniform he was wearing and shook his head. Of course, when taking on a military contract, one should wear a military uniform. That's a sign of respect. In fact, regarding Su Ming's attire, General Ross had intended it. He wanted everyone to know that even if there were some minor changes during the implementation of the plan. But in the end, it was still the military's people who solved the problem. That's right, Mr. Silver Duke is our military's specially appointed consultant. General Ross accepted the media interview with a formal expression. But after a few brief sentences, he waved his hand, telling the orderly to disperse the media. The reason given was to clean up the battlefield. Are you kidding? If they were going to film, they should wait until the area was mostly cleaned up. With things so chaotic now, those above who didn't know might think the military was utterly incompetent. General Ross thought so. Su Ming, who was beside him, evidently hadn't expected the far-sighted General Ross to unknowingly pull him into the military's camp, which made him feel a bit displeased. You sly old fox, he whispered softly into General Ross's ear. General, accepting interviews for the military, that's a different price. How could Ross not know that this move of his would undoubtedly give Silver Duke a military background? Ever since he witnessed his formidable strength, General Ross had set his sights on him. We must hold destiny firmly in our hands. Hearing Su Ming's words, the general readily agreed. No problem, Mr. Silver Duke. Watching Ross readily agree to pay, Su Ming's heart stirred. Since this old guy is so agreeable, I must have lost out in some way again. These hateful politicians. Their hearts are dirty. I'll stay away from them in the future. When the soldiers, with serious expressions, drove away the media reporters and the onlookers, and then turned back to look at Su Ming, their serious expressions instantly turned into deep admiration. At General Ross's request, Su Ming reprocessed the massive object that had knocked out Abomination. Otherwise, the military would have no way to deal with such a large thing. Clang, clang. The giant iron tower in the air disintegrated under Su Ming's control, turning into 1-meter square iron lumps, which landed on the ground in a rectangular formation. Clapping his hands, Su Ming smiled slightly, looking at General Ross's astonished expression. General, neutralizing Abomination is 300 million, and the interview and aftermath work are 200 million. Thank you for your business. After speaking, his figure transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from everyone's sight. General Ross, who had been astonished by Su Ming's uncanny ability just a second ago, felt his head buzz after hearing Su Ming's words. The interview and aftermath work that you handled with a mere wave of your hand, it costs 200 million US dollars. Do I look that much like a sucker? Ross didn't know that this was Su Ming's small revenge for him pulling him into the military without permission. Yay! Feeling the wind whistling past his ears, Su Ming let out a joyful cry. He no longer had to rely on painfully throwing knives to achieve flight. Just now, during the aftermath, Su Ming secretly picked up a piece of metal with good texture and appearance from countless metal fragments. His sudden departure was also an effect achieved by Su Ming controlling the piece of metal in his hand to fly. He could take some time to practice with this piece of iron, perhaps mold it into a glove or something, and then he would be able to move freely in the air. Regardless of Su Ming returning to his residence and beginning to seriously practice how to control metal, Tony Stark finally assembled the particle accelerator. He was making the final checks with a spirit level. Phil Coulson's gaze was drawn to a strange object, and he quickly recognized it. It was a circular piece of metal, with half a white 5-pointed star in the middle. This thing was just casually thrown here like this. What is this doing here? Tony stared at the object in Agent Phil Coulson's hand, his gaze lingering for a moment. That's it. Hand it to me. Agent Phil Coulson looked at Tony's expression and asked uncertainly. Do you know what this is? He lightly lifted his foot and gently handed the object to Tony. This is what I need to succeed. Tony told Agent Phil Coulson to lift the coil, while he placed the disc in his hand underneath the coil. He took the spirit level and measured it, perfectly level. Phil Coulson, an 8-level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., was once entrusted by director Nick Fury to assemble a research team to study Howard Stark's relics. The antidote that suppressed Tony's palladium poisoning symptoms was developed by the research team he assembled. Agent Coulson had a thorough understanding of Howard Stark's relics. He knew that this circular metal in front of him was accidentally synthesized by Howard Stark. The research team named it sound-absorbing steel. This sound-absorbing steel was made from a mixture of precious vibranium and original adamantium. Its hardness and shock resistance were unparalleled, and SHIELD has been unable to decipher its manufacturing process to this day. And the sound-absorbing steel was given by Director Fury to Destiny as a bargaining chip, which Agent Phil Coulson lamented as a pity. Such a priceless item was now casually used by Tony to prop up a coil, and he even helped him, which greatly broadened Agent Phil Coulson's horizons. As expected of the truly not short on money Tony. I'm quite busy, what do you need? After confirming the coil was level, Tony was a bit impatient to start the particle accelerator, but Agent Phil Coulson was still standing there, so he politely asked a question. He thought to himself, no matter what he needs, it can wait until I develop the new element. Coulson then remembered that he was being dispatched to New Mexico, and this trip was to bid farewell to Tony. He knew that in Director Fury's Avengers initiative, Tony Stark and his Iron Man suit were an indispensable part. So he wanted to make one last attempt to win Tony over before he left. We need you. Right, you desperately need me. Tony responded casually. Actually, not that much. Tony's Sunere attitude made Agent Coulson shake his head and leave. Absent-mindedly seeing Agent Coulson off, Tony was finally able to focus on developing the new element. The particle accelerator's reaction coil was already in place. All Tony needed to do was inject the immense energy into the carrier of the new element, a triangular special coil. Tony inserted the last prism into the device and flipped the switch. Ions were infinitely accelerated in the huge coil, forming a beam of energy. When Jarvis prompted, approaching maximum power, Tony immediately grabbed a large wrench and rotated the angle of the prism. As the arm holding the wrench continuously exerted force, muscles bulged. The energy beam left its original trajectory, cutting everything in its path, whether walls or objects, into two halves. Until the beam converged on the triangular carrier coil, emitting a dazzling light. Ding! Powerful energy filled and stably remained in the coil, forming a stable state, and the triangle emitted a faint glow. That was easy. Ignoring the mansion that was nearly cut in half, Tony exclaimed. Congratulations, sir, you have created a new element. Jarvis intelligently congratulated Tony, gently placing the new element into the miniature reactor. Tony watched nervously to see if the reactor could smoothly accept the new core. The scene shifted. Ivan Vanko was in a laboratory debugging his newly developed improved reactor. It's worth mentioning that this improvement was something Tony personally told him about back in prison. Some might ask, wasn't Ivan arrested and sent to prison? How is he freely conducting research here? Actually, Justin Hammer, the CEO of Hammer Group, recognized Ivan's talent and arranged for him to be released. That's right, a capitalist country is just that capricious. Since Stark Industries announced the cessation of weapon development projects, Hammer Group intended to take its place. However, they lacked outstanding research and development talent like Tony. The appearance of Ivan Vanko perfectly filled this void for Hammer Group. Justin Hammer's dream was to build an iron army composed purely of robot warriors, then sell them to the military at a high price, thereby establishing his unshakable position in the business world. He once boasted to Ivan, "As long as you help me build the Iron Army, I will give you everything you want." Little did he know that in Ivan's eyes, Hammer was just a fool who talked big about ideals, and his ambitions were worthless in front of Ivan, who possessed reactor technology. Ivan's goal had always been to get revenge on Stark, to avenge his father. Hammer's appearance merely accelerated his plan. Gladly, my friend. Watching Hammer's confident look, Ivan chuckled and agreed. However, Ivan had a trick up his sleeve. He used Hammer Group's resources to create more powerful electric whips, and he had also laid contingencies deep within the systems of all the combat robots. This also included the Mark II armor that Rhodes took from Tony, which allowed him to upgrade and modify weapons. He could control all of the above mechs from the backend at any time. Now he finally had the strength to directly challenge Tony. This made Ivan full of confidence and arrogantly dialed Tony's number. "Everything your father did to my family, I will repay in full within 40 minutes. This call rang an alarm for Tony. Call tracking showed the dialing location was from Manhattan. This guy is going to cause trouble. At the same time, his gaze noticed that Justin Hammer was about to hold a press conference. It's there. Tony directly slapped the reactor, which contained the new element core and had not yet completed testing, into his chest. As energy surged, the light on Tony's chest grew brighter and brighter. He directly ignored Jarvis's reminder. Oh, a coconut scent, and a metallic scent. The news about the Harlem riot caused by Abomination on TV was quickly replaced by another report. Justin Hammer spent a fortune to buy out mainstream media broadcasting channels, holding a grand press conference to publicly and ostentatiously introduce advanced weapon systems. Seeing Hammer Group's logo on every channel, Elisa snorted disdainfully. The boss settled Abomination and saved so many people, but the reports just disappeared. There's definitely something shady going on. Su Ming, on the sofa, was controlling a piece of metal suspended in midair, sometimes turning into Sun Wukong, sometimes Neja, and sometimes Yang Jian. The small metal sculptures were lifelike, truly exquisite uncolored figurines. I didn't expect the sketching mastery I casually exchanged for to come in handy here. After a period of practice, Su Ming was already able to freely control metal to deform into the shapes he imagined. This had a lot to do with the sketching mastery he had exchanged for. After all, sculpture is also a form of art. Listening to Elisa's complaints, Su Ming was noncommittal. His biggest regret now was listening to General Ross, putting on the military's clothes, and exposing himself in front of the cameras. All the overwhelming reports before were proclaiming that Scarlet Silver Duke had become the military's lapdog. This made Su Ming somewhat displeased. Fortunately, General Ross was sensible enough, and $500 million arrived in his account shortly after. For the sake of the money, I won't bother with you this time. But a mere $500 million was not enough to further enhance his strength. Just as Su Ming was wondering where to get more money next, he saw Justin Hammer's high-profile press conference on TV, recalled Elisa's earlier words, and his eyes gradually lit up. What did you just say? Su Ming seemed to not have heard clearly. I said there's something shady. Yes, absolutely. Elisa was still stuck in her angry emotions. Ever since she had become intimate with Su Ming, she had become his most steadfast supporter. Help me confirm the press conference location, I'm going out. Su Ming suddenly remembered that this press conference seemed to be very lively, and those rows of seemingly mighty combat armors should be worth a lot of money. It seemed like he could once again make a fortune amidst the chaos, and without any subsequent trouble. Such opportunities, which were essentially handing him money, were rare. He casually transformed the metal figurine into a thin, fingerless glove. He picked up his long unused scarlet jacket, and with a flash, flew out the window. Hammer's Expo officially opened. This was Justin Hammer's moment to shine. He had enough confidence in his Iron Legion. He was dancing provocatively while claiming he would replace Iron Man. With a wave of his hands, under the majestic background music, a large number of Iron Mechs slowly rose onto the stage. And the modified Iron Man Mark II, War Machine, also made its debut. It's worth mentioning that after James Rhodes and Tony had a fight, when Rhodes returned to the military to upgrade his armor's weapons himself, he encountered Hammer. Hammer praised his weapon system to the heavens, and what satisfied Colonel Rhodes the most was a miniature missile called Ex-Wife. It was said that its power was no less than any large missile. This made Colonel Rhodes regard the Ex-Wife as War Machine's trump card, cherishing it greatly. Just as Hammer was feeling smug, Tony, wearing the Mark VI armor equipped with a new reactor, made a dazzling entrance. His handsome landing action drew cheers from the entire audience. We have a problem. Ignoring the excited crowd, Tony warned Rhodes that this was all a conspiracy. Tony, there are civilians here. I'm here on orders. We can talk about it later. Clearly, Rhodes misunderstood Tony's intentions. For the next 5 minutes, you have to trust me. Everyone here is in danger. Tony waved to the audience while sternly reminding Colonel Rhodes. But Rhodes didn't believe Tony's words. I trusted you, and I got beaten up at your house, remember? It wasn't until Tony mentioned Hammer and Ivan's collusion that War Machine Rhodes wavered slightly. Ivan is still alive. Just as Tony stepped forward to question Ivan's whereabouts, Rhodes in the War Machine exclaimed. Oh, this is not good. War Machine suddenly raised its machine gun and aimed it at Tony. A large number of iron armors behind him also locked onto him. I'm locked on. Is that you? Tony received a warning from Jarvis that he was locked on by War Machine and loudly questioned Rhodes. No, it's not me. Get out. The whole system has been hacked. Leave here. Colonel Rhodes' dark face was now flushed red by the unauthorized warning on the display. He realized something was wrong. He had lost control of the mech, and could only urge Tony to leave quickly. In a secret room in the Hammer factory, Ivan Vanko seized control of War Machine and all the iron armors. The revenge plan officially began. To avoid harming innocents, Tony immediately flew into the sky. All the armors launched attacks in the direction Tony was flying. The highly futuristic ceiling, under the impact of bullets, turned into a rain of shattered tempered glass. This scene caused panic among the people. The audience below screamed and fled for their lives, and the scene descended into chaos. Some of the armors took off on the spot to pursue Tony, and seeing that Tony was difficult to deal with, the remaining armors walked directly into the crowd and began to launch indiscriminate attacks on civilians. At this moment, an armor aimed at an Iron Man mask on a little boy's head, preparing to launch an attack. The little boy, however, fearlessly raised his right hand to face the tall enemy, as if he were Iron Man and could send the opponent to the afterlife with one shot. Just then, Tony arrived in time, and a palm laser cannon resolved the child's crisis. Well done, kid. Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, who had been accompanying Pepper in the audience, couldn't help but act. She immediately ran onto the stage, angrily pressed Hammer onto a table, forcing him to reveal Ivan's location. After getting the exact location, Tony's bodyguard Happy took Black Widow and rushed to Hammer's factory. Black Widow took off her coat in the car and changed into her combat suit. The dazzling sight made Happy wish he could stick his head directly into the rearview mirror. The car suddenly swayed. Too bright, couldn't see clearly. It's unclear if Happy couldn't see the road clearly or something else. Regardless of Happy only managing to take down one enemy with all his might, Black Widow had already dealt with all the guards in a corridor. Su Ming, who flew over the expo, just happened to catch Tony taking off to draw enemy fire. Perfect timing. Su Ming quickly observed the battlefield and found that the combat mechs on the stage were successively taking off to pursue Tony, while the others were leaving the venue to launch indiscriminate attacks on nearby buildings. The successful individuals, both men and women, who had just been attending the expo, now deeply regretted the design of their formal wear. This is so unsuitable for running away. As they ran past an electrical box, they despairingly discovered a rocket rapidly shooting towards it. Just as the electrical box was about to be hit and explode, Su Ming flashed forward, and with a backhand slap, he sent the massive projectile flying. Boom! The projectile exploded not far away. It framed Su Ming's scarlet figure with a shimmering golden edge. The gentlemen rescued behind Su Ming were surprised to find, "You're also wearing a suit, how are you so excellent?" It wasn't until a lady recognized Su Ming and let out an excited scream. "Ah! It's Scarlet Silver Duke." Only then did people clearly see the metallic sheen of the mask on Su Ming's face. "I suggest taking off your high heels before running." Looking at the excited ladies, Su Ming left a remark, then rushed towards the artillery firing armor, and with a sweep of his hand. Exchange. Exchange successful. Plus 12 million United States dollars. Account balance. 515,100,000 United States dollars. Before the system could even provide an estimated value, Su Ming had already turned the armor in front of him into dust, earning 12 million United States dollars. All right. Successfully exchanging an armor for an account balance, the long-lost thrill of scavenging the battlefield surged into Su Ming's heart. Continue. Looking at the war machines developed by Hammer Group in front of him, Su Ming seemed to see piles of cash waving at him. He instantly transformed into a second-hand mech recycling station, flashing in and out of the venue. One armor after another turned into data streams and entered Su Ming's pocket. When Black Widow and Happy forcefully broke into the control room where Ivan had been issuing commands, it was already deserted. Only a computer monitor remained with the unexited interface for controlling the mechs and war machine. As a seasoned agent, Black Widow, upon discovering the loss of the primary mission target, quickly made the correct judgment. That was to release control of Colonel Rhodes' war machine. Now, looking at another part of the battlefield. As Tony flew out of the venue, he vaguely saw a red figure in the sky. After Jarvis magnified the image, Tony recognized Su Ming. Silver Duke. How did he get here? But at that moment, pursuers arrived, led by his good friend, Colonel Rhodes. Tony had no time to ponder why Su Ming was there. After casually resolving a few civilian crises, he accelerated and flew into the distance. But after all, it was the Mark II mech personally built by Tony, and its maneuverability was no less than that of the Mark VI he was currently wearing. War Machine clung tightly to Tony, its machine guns firing large-caliber bullets indiscriminately. It wasn't until Tony used a giant sculpture to filter out the blindly pursuing Hammer mechs that only War Machine remained in the air, following Tony. They flew into an eco-park, where War Machine's bullets hit Tony, breaking his flight balance, and the two armors tumbled down into a small stream. Just as Tony was struggling to pry open War Machine's Gatling gun, which was firing at close range, Black Widow finally remotely rebooted War Machine's system. Black Widow remotely shared the results with Tony. The new reactor is cool. Data shows a significant increase in energy output, and vital signs are stable. Tony had already known her identity. Thank you, Agent Natasha. Yes, I'm not going to die just yet. Thanks. Pepper bristled upon hearing their conversation. What do you mean, not going to die? Are you saying you were about to die? Just as Tony was struggling to distract Pepper, Black Widow saw more mechs flying towards Tony on the display. I'm angry. Deal with these robots, and I'll formally apologize to you. We can go to Venice. Oh, Come on. Regardless of whether he managed to appease the bristling pepper, Tony definitely tried. Rhodes tapped War Machine's helmet, and the screen in front of him lit up again. Wake up, buddy. I need you. Rhodes realized more enemies were coming and he couldn't stay down any longer. Being passively chased by Tony earlier made Rhodes feel utterly helpless. With his helmet open, Rhodes felt like a joker before. Tony had specifically rushed to warn him, but he hadn't believed him immediately. He had also nearly killed his good brother. If Tony knew Rhodes' thoughts at this moment, he would certainly scoff. Kill me. What were you thinking? Rhodes suddenly felt ashamed to be wearing Tony's armor and couldn't help but say. Oh, man, I think you can take the armor back now. Pulling Rhodes up and seeing his apparent apology, Tony shook his head. Forget it, I dragged you into this. Rhodes didn't know. Tony had intentionally caused the commotion in California back then. At the time, he thought his days were numbered. After a period of getting to know each other, Tony knew Rhodes was an upright guy, and he deserved the armor he had painstakingly developed. To allow Rhodes to wear his suit without burden and become Iron Man's successor, Tony had put some thought into it. One moment, the two had resolved their differences, and the next, they had a disagreement over combat operations. Let's go up. This is a firefight, it's too dangerous to stay here. I think taking out those robots here is a good option. Just as the two were arguing about where to engage the enemy, hammer armors surrounded them. A group of enhanced drones simultaneously locked onto the two. The helmets clanged shut, and Rhodes and Tony began to fight. The two fought back to back, tacitly filling each other's firepower gaps, as if the argument just now involved two different people. Just then, Su Ming, who had been chasing the armors, arrived. He had already recycled all the armors in the venue, earning a whopping $300 million. Seeing the large, high-value enhanced armors chasing Tony, Su Ming certainly wouldn't let go of this last wave of gold coin monsters. Watching the two's tacit agreement in the field, a scene flashed through his mind. Tony seemed to be about to unleash a powerful area attack here, instantly wiping out all enemies on the field. Cool is cool, but it's too wasteful. The two were fighting with machine guns and palm cannons, and the gold coin babies in Su Ming's eyes went from brand new to worn out, looking like they wouldn't fetch a good price. Stop. In a hurry, Su Ming activated magnetic control to freeze all the armors in place. Including Tony and Rhodes. Magneto's methods were perfectly suited for Iron Man's armor. Warning. Warning. Armor unable to move due to unknown reasons. Jarvis and War Machine's intelligent assistants simultaneously sounded the alarm. Tony and Rhodes, the two brothers, looked bewildered and said in unison. What the? Tony was about to show off a unique big move, supported by the new Mark 6 power source, in front of Rhodes. He found that his body suddenly couldn't move, and he couldn't even perform basic operations like opening his helmet. The occasional static on the screen also meant that he could lose his vision at any time. A feeling of powerlessness from losing control instantly filled Tony's heart. Tony guessed that this might be Ivan's tactic against him, and a cold sweat instantly broke out on his palms. His brain was spinning rapidly, thinking of countermeasures, but the noisy Rhodes clearly wasn't going to let him have a moment of peace. Oh, God, buddy, my suit seems to be controlled again, what should we do? Think of something quickly. Shut up, I can't move either. The two started arguing again on the comms. After Su Ming froze all the armors, he didn't stop moving, his red figure quickly shuttling between the hammer armors. Redeem. Redemption successful. Plus $20 million. Account balance $801 million. Redeem. It was indeed more valuable than before. A moment later. Perhaps for Tony and the other, a long time passed. Su Ming finally recycled all the armors in the field. Plus $20 million. Account balance. $981 million. Looking at the restored tranquility of the ecological park, he let out a happy sigh. This trip wasn't in vain, I earned a lot again. He suddenly saw Tony and the other standing motionless in the field, still in their shooting poses. Only then did he remember that the two brothers were still frozen. He casually released his control over them. At the same time, he noticed his hands were covered in black ash from the gunpowder smoke, so he walked to the river and squatted down to wash them. Who? Get down. Sizzle. Buzz. Tony, who had regained movement, immediately shouted for Rhodes to get down, and his body rapidly spun, unleashing a long accumulated powerful attack. Two energy-filled red lasers shot from Tony's wrists, and a powerful cutting light circle flashed past, cutting down large trees at the waist. The inspiration for this powerful move came from the house that was almost cut in half when Tony created the new element. Through observation, Tony realized that his big move seemed to have missed any target. The two stood back to back, machine guns and palm cannons at the ready, cautiously searching for targets, as if facing a formidable enemy. They suddenly realized that all the hammer robots that had been all over the hillside were now gone. What the hell? The two opened their masks and exchanged a blank stare. Suddenly, they heard the sound of flowing water nearby. Click, click. Two metallic clangs of helmets dropping sounded one after another. Rhodes aimed his machine gun, and Tony also raised his arm, his laser cannon glowing with stored energy. When he clearly saw the figure squatting on the ground washing his hands, Rhodes cursed aloud. Oh, shit, it's an ally. You should have said so sooner. Tony, on the other hand, thought about his inability to move just now, his eyes filled with suspicion. Was that Silver Duke's doing just now? I've never seen him use it. What other secrets does he have? What are you doing here? Su Ming's spider sense had warned him as soon as he squatted down, and then a fierce laser swept over. He happened to be squatting on the ground, so he simply didn't dodge. The laser grazed the top of his head, not hitting his body. Facing Tony's question, Su Ming smiled. Do I have to tell you just because you asked? He answered casually. Nothing, I just happened to be passing by and washing my hands. Rhodes thought, you can't just brush people off like that. Passing by my ass. Don't tell me you didn't see the robots all over the mountain just now. By the way, where did those robots go? Tony, who had interacted with Su Ming a few times, knew that this person's whereabouts were mysterious and his methods unpredictable. Those robots were most likely dealt with by Silver Duke. Since he didn't want to say, then so be it, he wasn't that curious either. Just then, Agent Natasha's alert sounded in Tony and Rhodes' ears. Attention! Another drone is flying over. This one looks different, its propulsion power is exceptionally high. Tony and Rhodes looked up at the sky upon hearing this. Another set of mechanical armor steadily landed from high altitude. The helmet opened, and Ivan Vanko, with a cheerful smile, appeared before Tony and Rhodes. It's good to be back. Colonel James Rhodes blurted out, looking at Ivan descending from the sky. This is not good. Ivan's confident expression gradually turned arrogant, and he crossed his arms over his chest and forcefully swung them downwards. Sizzle. Smack. Two thicker, crackling electrical whips instantly carved two deep grooves in the ground. Rhodes had a flash of inspiration. I have special weapons, I'll deal with him. Su Ming felt that the purpose of this action had been achieved, and he found a comfortable position to enjoy the upcoming battle. Colonel Rhodes recalled the ex-wife micro-missile, the one weapon among many that Hammer had recommended that he liked the most. Thinking, Tony, my brother, watch my performance this time. I'm going to blast open his fortress with the ex-wife. With what? Tony suspected he had misheard. Colonel Rhodes took a handsome step forward and activated the ex-wife launch switch. Whoosh. The armor on his shoulder opened up, revealing a sharp missile head. Under the sound of mechanical operation, the thruster's flame spewed out a long trail. After a brief aiming and charging, the ex-wife powerfully shot towards Ivan Vanko's chest armor. Dong. Plop. The ex-wife slammed hard into Ivan's chest armor, making a crisp sound, then flipped a few times in the air before landing in the water at Ivan's feet. The imagined violent explosion did not occur. After the ex-wife stubbornly sparked a few times in the water, it made no further movement. Looking at the missile's outstanding performance, Tony was dumbfounded and casually asked. Produced by Hammer. The War Machine missile bay closed in response, and Colonel Rhodes said helplessly. Yes. He never expected that the ex-wife missile, on which he had placed such high hopes, would be a dud. It was so embarrassing. It was far too unworthy of such a powerful name. In short, Colonel Rhodes was very disappointed. On the screen in front of Tony, Jarvis locked onto several positions on Ivan's chest for him. Still, let me handle it. The Mark 6 missile bay popped up, and several finger-sized micro-missiles shot out. Seeing this, Ivan closed his helmet, letting the attacks explode on his chest and helmet, yet remaining unharmed. It was just a bit louder than the ex-wife, at least it exploded. Shaking his arms, the whips, with their full electric light effects, struck at the two with a thunderous sound. Whoosh! Slam! Tony and Rhodes dodged this extraordinary move. The machine guns on War Machine's shoulders and hands fired simultaneously, creating dense flashes of fire on Ivan's armor, but they never broke through his defense. Slam! A whip flashed by, and Rhodes suddenly realized that the heavy Gatling machine gun on his shoulder, which he was so proud of, its barrel was gone. Shit. The big guy's gone. What kind of war machine is it then? Rhodes' mood was somewhat complicated at this moment, but it didn't affect him from continuing to fire the machine guns in his hands. Tony tried to fly and charge Ivan, but Ivan's armor was unusually strong. After several collisions, he achieved no results and was even entangled around his neck by Ivan's lightning whip. Rhodes was even worse. With his already insufficient experience in operating the armor, he was easily knocked down in front of Ivan. When he tried to get up, he was entangled around the neck by another lightning whip. Ivan was having his moment of glory. Iron Man in his right hand, War Machine in his left, the high-power lightning whips in his hands fiercely suppressed the two. This made Ivan want to shout with exhilaration. Su Ming, watching from the side, knew that the famous scene was about to come. In his memory, the laser cannons from the palms of the two Mark armors would erupt with powerful force, like the magic link of wands clashing in Harry Potter. Su Ming subconsciously straightened his back, not wanting to miss this exciting scene. Tony's agile mind instantly recalled an incident when he and Rhodes fought at his home and they had fired a shot at each other, which had considerable power. A plan formed in his mind. Rhodes, I have an idea, want to be a hero. What? Rhodes, glowing with electricity all over, was worrying if his suit could withstand the lightning whip when Tony's voice rang in his ears, but he didn't immediately grasp Tony's idea. I need a sidekick. Raise your hand. With that, Tony raised his palm towards Rhodes, the arc reactor in his palm flickering. Seeing Tony's actions, Rhodes understood. You cooperate, but what's with needing a sidekick? Do you always have to be one step ahead of others? Is this your plan? That's right, are you ready? Tony urged loudly. All right, come on, come on. Rhodes also raised his palm at this moment, aiming it at Tony. Ivan watched their movements, realizing this seemed to be some new move of theirs. He secretly thought, not good. Then, Iron Man and War Machine simultaneously fired high-frequency energy cannons from their opposing palms. Zzz. Boom. Two dazzling beams of light converged simultaneously on Ivan's armor, triggering a powerful explosion. The blinding white light turned the spherical dome of the ecological park into a shining light bulb. They were currently in a large ecological park in the city center, a place with beautiful mountains and water, but the explosion left it in ruins. The explosion was so violent that it even blew Tony and Rhodes several meters away. When the two walked forward to check on Ivan's condition, Ivan was already lying on the ground, his armor shattered, and the arc reactor on his chest flickered with a dangerous red light. You lost. The instant defeat made Ivan contemplate death. After secretly activating the self-destruct program for all drones, including his own arc reactor, he remained defiant. Imagining that so many drones exploding would take countless people with him to meet God, Ivan convinced himself that this wave was not a loss. Tony, realizing that Ivan was about to self-destruct, knew that the power of an arc reactor explosion was no joke. He immediately thought of Pepper, who was still in the venue. Worried, he let out a roar, flames shooting from his hands and feet as he shot into the air, soaring into the distance. As Tony flew at high speed, he had only one thought: get Pepper away from the explosion. Little did he know, Su Ming had already collected all the drones. Tony picked up Pepper and flew far away from the danger zone. Upon landing, he received Pepper's resignation application. Her reason was that she could no longer bear the pressure of Tony's self-destructive behavior. Regardless of how Tony defeated his enemy with one move, a deep kiss instantly changed Pepper's mind and also confirmed his own feelings. Su Ming, in the ecological park, felt the trip was worthwhile. He had earned money, watched the show, and it was time to go back and get some rest. Looking at the dying yet strangely excited Ivan Vanko on the ground, a thought stirred in his mind. You don't still think the other drones will explode with you, do you? Su Ming just couldn't stand this type of person who acted arrogant just because they were smart. Hearing Su Ming's words, Ivan was stunned. He quickly checked the status of the other drones through his armor system, and the feedback he received made him collapse. Unable to connect, the beeping sound of the arc reactor's self-destruction grew sharper and sharper. Shit. Ivan, who had been unharmed by countless bullets, broke down at this moment. Boom. A huge fireball leveled the entire ecological park. And Su Ming, after successfully provoking Ivan, activated magnetic control, turning his body into a stream of light and fleeing far away. Natasha's mission at Stark Industries was over. Natasha submitted a detailed evaluation report on Tony Stark. Based on her report, Tony Stark was rejected for recommendation to join the Avengers Initiative. There were several keywords in it: obsessive-compulsive behavioral traits, self-destructive tendencies, classic narcissist, etc. Nick Fury fully agreed with this report. After all, Natasha had been observing Tony up close during her infiltration of Stark Industries for more than just a day or two. Her evaluation of Tony was fair, especially that phrase, classic narcissist. He had thought S.H.I.E.L.D. would, as before, chase after him, urging him to join the Avengers Initiative. He didn't expect Natasha's evaluation report to directly change S.H.I.E.L.D.'s view of him. Tony was a bit confused. That makes no sense. How can you approve of me and not approve of me at the same time? But the flaw in his arrogant personality was exposed at this moment, and Tony began to defend himself. Nick Fury finally regretfully informed Tony. For now, we believe you can only serve as a consultant. In the dry desert of New Mexico, an off-road vehicle kicked up a long trail of dust. Agent Phil Coulson didn't understand why he was suddenly transferred to New Mexico. He recalled Director Fury's mysterious demeanor before he left. You'll know when you get there. Coulson grew even more curious. The vehicle stopped, and Agent Coulson looked around. A massive circular crater appeared before his eyes, like a meteorite impact site. Filled with immense curiosity, Agent Coulson walked to the center of the crater and discovered an ancient-looking hammer resting there. According to reports from the staff, a few days ago, this hammer fell from the sky, creating the large crater. The most astonishing thing was that no one could move the hammer an inch, not even heavy machinery. This miraculous phenomenon alerted SHIELD agents, who immediately reported the situation to the director and drove away the public attempting to hold a strongman competition with the hammer. Unconvinced, Coulson gathered his team, tied a rope to the hammer's handle, and secured the other end to the tow hitch of a high-displacement truck. As the vehicle accelerated, the thick rope instantly snapped taut, but the hammer remained motionless. The wheels spun, kicking up large clouds of dust. When the truck floored the accelerator, attempting to pull further, an unexpected scene unfolded. The truck's dump bed, under the pull of the rope, detached from the vehicle with a crash and fell to the ground. This truly opened Agent Coulson's eyes. No matter how heavy this hammer was, it shouldn't be completely immovable even with a truck pulling it. He then thought of Su Ming. Mr. Silver Duke seems to have immense strength. I'll find an opportunity to call him over and let him try to lift this hammer. Or perhaps he even recognizes this thing. Agent Coulson immediately ordered the surrounding area to be cordoned off, focusing entirely on studying the hammer. Su Ming had been a bit idle recently. After earning a fortune at the Hammer Expo, he hadn't yet encountered any new profitable opportunities. Although Elisa updated him daily with intelligence from the underground exchange, nothing had piqued his interest at a worthwhile price. To acquire more US dollars, ordinary money-making methods were far from satisfying Su Ming anymore. Su Ming once boldly envisioned exchanging for a skill similar to hypnosis, to control the people in charge of the entire US dollar printing system. Just print money directly, not too much, just $1 trillion to start with. Anyway, these US dollars flowing into his account wouldn't have any impact on the financial economy. When he jokingly brought up this idea to Elisa, Elisa slowly shook her head. She pulled out her computer and brought up the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing's annual report. The report showed that the United States prints between 3 to 5 billion banknotes annually. Calculated over 250 working days a year, the daily average printing is 12 to 20 million banknotes. Even if all printed notes were the highest denomination of 100 US dollars, 1 trillion US dollars would be 10 billion banknotes. Based on the maximum printing quantity, printing 10 billion $100 bills would take 500 days, which is 1 year and 5 months. Elisa's simple calculation enlightened Su Ming. He immediately dismissed the idea. Not to mention the difficulty of implementation, even if he printed money in his backyard at 2 billion a day, the raw materials for printing US dollars wouldn't keep up. Furthermore, it would be a chain reaction. He might be targeted as soon as he started printing, leading to a shocking major case. If cash wasn't feasible, what about digital currency? Operating in the bank's backend and transferring tens of billions to himself didn't seem impossible. When Su Ming proposed this new idea, Elisa's strange gaze made him uncomfortable. Elisa couldn't understand why her boss, whose money-making ability was already heaven-defying, still had such wild and unrealistic ideas. She patiently explained that the realm of digital currency was even more complex. Theoretically, temporary asset transfers might be possible through technical means, but the probability of detection was extremely high. Bank risk control, blockchain tracking, and the synergistic effect of international websites made such an operation almost impossible to complete. And the consequences would be severe, another shocking major case. Although Su Ming, with his current abilities, wasn't particularly afraid of standing against a nation, he still wanted to live a peaceful life. Adventures he chose were explorations. Being passively adventurous every day was a miserable existence. Reflecting, Su Ming realized he was truly a mess in some aspects. Even when exchanging talents from the system, he just picked whatever looked good and he could afford, completely disregarding cost effectiveness. His habit of not reading exam questions before writing answers in school remained unchanged to this day. Su Ming's thoughts drifted further away. The calculations Elisa helped him with made Su Ming realize his own problems. He wasn't good at managing money and had no plan. But in an instant, Su Ming felt relieved. I'm a poor student. It would be abnormal if I were proficient in finance and stocks, right? Su Ming was originally a go-with-the-flow type of person. Grand ideals and ambitions had little to do with him. The most important thing in life is to be happy. Recalling his days in internet cafes grinding materials for the boss in Legend of Mir, a few thousand big bills in his account each month were enough to satisfy him. If it weren't for the severe back pain that made it impossible to sit, he wouldn't have switched to being a writer. But now, since fate had given him a second chance, Su Ming naturally wanted to seize it. Returning to the issue of making money, Su Ming summarized his income channels. One was completing commissions to earn fees, and the other was using the system to exchange items. Compared to that, using the system to exchange items was clearly more efficient. The instant exchange of a Jericho missile vehicle for 120 million had left a deep impression on Su Ming. Finding high-value items to exchange for money seemed to be the key to breaking through. But what could be exchanged and what could not? That was the question. After dismissing Elisa, Su Ming's imagination ran wild. He wanted to see if the entire hotel could be exchanged, so he placed his hand on the hotel floor. Valuation. High-grade cashmere carpet right-pointing arrow valuation $20,000. Who told you to value the carpet? He pulled back the carpet to reveal the smooth hardwood floor. Valuation. Manhattan XX Hotel building right-pointing arrow $2.5 billion non-exchangeable. Items whose disappearance would disrupt world order right-pointing arrow non-exchangeable. This was the first time Su Ming encountered a non-exchangeable prompt, and the system thoughtfully provided an explanation. He repeatedly savored the phrase. Indeed, items exchanged in the past would disappear, turning into account balance. World refers to this particular world, right? Disappearance will disrupt world order. In other words, if the hotel building were exchanged, the building would disappear, but the disappearing building would disrupt the order of this world. Of course, with so many people in the building, if the building suddenly disappeared, hundreds of guests in hundreds of rooms would fall to the ground from different heights and die in droves. This scene was too exaggerated, even Inception wouldn't dare film it like that. No wonder it couldn't be exchanged. Su Ming somewhat understood the meaning of non-exchangeable now. But from another perspective, could it be understood this way? Items with little connection to the world order could be exchanged. What if he tried an abandoned building? With this question in mind, Su Ming found an unfinished building after dark. Looking at the building with no windows, Su Ming murmured. Valuation. Pacific Park unfinished building right pointing arrow valuation $80 million non-exchangeable. Su Ming was a bit puzzled. This kind of unfinished building was in a remote area and uninhabited, so why couldn't it be exchanged? Unconvinced, Su Ming walked aimlessly down the street, valuing the buildings around him as he went. Unconsciously, he arrived at Times Square. Amidst the crowd, looking at the world-renowned giant billboards, Su Ming curiously initiated a valuation. Times Square one right pointing arrow $500 million non-exchangeable. Undoubtedly, the system still showed it as non-exchangeable. What Su Ming didn't know was that those unfinished buildings were precisely connected to the existence of more people. Not only was there government intervention, but there were also multiple debt disputes and lawsuits, some even involving the livelihoods of many people, so of course he couldn't exchange them. Finally, Su Ming shook his head helplessly. I still need to find a way to exchange for weapons of war or other valuable items. Those things don't have much impact if there are a few more or less, and they're valuable. If I'm lucky enough to find a nuclear bomb, hydrogen bomb, atomic bomb. Just then, a sudden change occurred. Max Dillon was an ordinary electrical engineer who worked for the Osborne Group, responsible for maintaining its circuit systems. He was introverted and insecure, often ignored or even ridiculed by his colleagues, lacking a sense of presence. Even on his birthday, his colleagues would forget his name. Only Spider-Man saved him in an accident and called him a friend, which made Max admire Spider-Man. Since then, his home was covered in Spider-Man posters, and Max regarded Spider-Man as the only person who recognized him. He even fantasized about becoming partners with Spider-Man. But an accident changed his fate. While Max was repairing circuits, he made an operational error and fell into a cultivation tank full of transgenic electric eels. His body was pierced by high-voltage current, leaving him charred. The Osborne Group thought he was dead and planned to hastily dispose of him to protect the company's reputation. However, Max suddenly woke up in the morgue, and the char on his body flaked off. He found that he could see the bioelectricity within his body, and not only that, but the surrounding electrical appliances seemed to sense his leaking energy and began to operate on their own without being plugged in. At this moment, Max did not yet know that he was no longer human. He picked up the clothes nearby and aimlessly walked onto the street. Everywhere he went, the surrounding cars would automatically flash their alarms, and Max also felt an unprecedented hunger. He slowly placed one hand on a car's headlight, and the next second, that faint current was completely absorbed by him. This bit of electricity slightly alleviated Max's hunger, but it was far from enough. His gaze turned to the brightly lit Times Square not far away. To Max, that was simply a five-star buffet, and the power grid buried underground attracted him like crazy, like snail noodles. He impatiently ran to the center of the square, knelt on the ground, opened the railing, and unhesitatingly placed both hands on it. Under Max's greedy suction, the electricity of the entire square was affected. This also caught the attention of a nearby police officer. "Sir, take your hands off the cable. Hurry." Max slowly stood up, his body emitting a faint blue electric light, which scared the police officer. The police officer instinctively raised his gun, which in turn startled Max. In a moment of desperation, he activated his electricity to materialize, lifting a passing truck high into the air and throwing it aside. The police quickly arrived and surrounded Max. "Get on the ground immediately. For your safety and the safety of the surrounding citizens." Under the reports of the surrounding reporters, Max's unusual face was projected onto the giant billboard in Times Square. As an insecure level 10 electrician, his dream was to one day be valued by others. He never expected that his wish would come true now, but in this manner. "Hands up, freak." Just as Max was staring blankly at himself in the advertisement, the police threw a smoke grenade and loudly shouted, "Freak. No, no, don't do this. This isn't my fault. I said, stop." Max's emotions finally ignited. His body burst with powerful energy, and blue electric light spread out in a circle, instantly blasting away many police cars and police officers. The police decisively opened fire. Strangely, the bullets were torn apart by a powerful electric force field as they approached Max. Times Square one is only worth $500 million US. Su Ming felt very surprised after valuing the building covered with electronic advertising screens. Suddenly, the billboard flickered, looking like it was running out of power. Soon, exclamations came from the crowd. Turning his head, he saw a person in a hoodie emitting electric light from his hands, lifting a truck over his head. "Oh, wow, isn't that? Electroman is here, so Xiao Zhiju should be arriving soon." Su Ming sighed that New York was truly a city plagued by disasters. He could even encounter Electroman while out for a stroll. Ignoring the scattering civilians, Su Ming pulled a chair from the street and found a good spot to sit down. "All right, time for a break, watch the show, eat some melon." A web line cut across the night sky. Spider-Man, Peter Parker, agilely arrived beneath the flying police car, propped it up, and saved the police officer who was about to be crushed. "Good thing you're driving and not riding a horse." Peter thought he was being humorous. The rescued police officer's eyes lit up when he saw Spider-Man arrive, and he immediately informed all police officers via walkie-talkie. "All personnel cease fire immediately. Repeat, cease fire immediately." Peter did a somersault onto the car roof, looking at the bewildered figure. "Hey, Sparky, what are you doing?" Max turned around and found his good partner Spider-Man there, and his terrified emotions were instantly soothed. "The only person who recognizes me is finally here. They called me a monster, but it's not my fault. They shot at me, and they gassed me with smoke bombs." Max had a belly full of grievances he wanted to pour out to Spider-Man, but all that came out was, "Is that you?" Peter Parker had no idea who this guy glowing blue all over was. He had accidentally saved Max before and only knew his name from the work ID on his chest, and had even encouraged him a bit. But at this moment, he couldn't recognize Max at all. After all, his transformation was a bit drastic. Hearing Max's words, Peter responded loudly, "Yeah, I'm here, who are you?" "Spider-Man's, who are you?" made Max's heart sink. Stepping towards Peter, Max couldn't believe that his only recognized good partner now didn't remember him. To protect Spider-Man's reputation, he had argued with others, and he had never fought for himself like that. Max found it unbelievable. He could endure the grievances given by others, but Spider-Man's forgetting him almost made him unable to suppress his instinctive rage. A burst of electric light shot from his toes, conducting along the ground into the distance, almost affecting the civilians on the steps. "You don't remember me?" Peter Parker felt like he had missed something, but couldn't recall it at the moment, and subconsciously asked, "Should I remember you? I was walking on the street, and a car almost hit me, and you picked me up, you saved me. You said you needed me." Max reminded Spider-Man of their past encounter, how much he wished Spider-Man would recognize him at a glance. The one with the blue blueprints. Peter finally remembered the person he had casually saved before, so it was him. How did he become like this? But no matter what, he had to calm him down and prevent more civilians from being harmed. Peter pretended to be relaxed and went forward to talk, finally remembering Max's name at the edge of Max's anger. And explained that he had changed so much that he didn't recognize him at first. This explanation was accepted by Max. After a brief conversation, Max stated that he didn't want the police officers to shoot him. Hey, guys, this is my buddy, Max. I've told you about him, don't shoot him. Peter's actions won Max's trust. Looking at himself on the large advertising screen, he spoke his true feelings. I just want everyone to see me. Peter continuously comforted Max, and Max was also ready to properly suppress the unspeakable anger within him. Just as the two were about to move to another place for a good talk, Max stepped on a piece of metal, and a huge burst of energy erupted from his body, creating a flash of electric light. This startled the sniper who had been aiming at him for a long time. Bang! The bullet shattered in front of Max. Max could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He unleashed a bolt of electric light, collapsing the rooftop where the sniper was located. Peter immediately shot a web, pulling back Max's hand, but a strong current traveled along the web, knocking Peter away and destroying the web shooter on his wrist. Even so, Peter still managed to save a police officer in time. This scene made the entire crowd raise their arms and cheer. Spider-Man! Spider-Man! Watching his image on the billboard switch entirely to close-ups of Spider-Man, his ears filled with malicious insults from people. Max realized he had been tricked by Spider-Man. He only wanted to step on him to gain more public support. With his faith shattered, Max was utterly enraged. Completely insane. The big screen still broadcasted a close-up of Spider-Man, and under the deliberate efforts of the photographer, Xiaozhiju's figure appeared tall and magnificent. The cheers of the onlookers echoed over Times Square. With Spider-Man present, the people who were originally fleeing in panic switched to spectator mode, directing all their venomous curses at Max. They didn't worry at all about detonating this ticking time bomb. At this moment, Spider-Man's glorious image formed a stark contrast with the pitiful Max, making Max feel as if he were in hell. Spider-Man's actions were undoubtedly a betrayal in Max's eyes. When a person's grievances accumulate to a certain extent, they will transform into anger, not to mention Max's newly transformed body was already filled with volatile energy. Liar. Go to hell. Max finally launched an attack on the light in his heart, Spider-Man. Violent currents surged from the ground towards Spider-Man. Peter quickly flipped over to dodge the attack, but the current had already transmitted through the ground to the metal handrail. The most dangerous ones were clearly the people standing on the steps. With his spider sense fully activated, the movement speed of the surrounding scenery instantly slowed down in Peter's eyes. Using his last remaining web shooters, he performed an extreme maneuver before danger arrived. He pressed his left hand against the web shooter's outlet, causing the ejected webs to scatter due to the pressure, timely grabbing all the people who were about to be electrocuted. Electroman's attacks followed one after another, blasting out one large pit after another behind Spider-Man. Peter, tumbling in the air, shot a web to pull up a fire hydrant and threw it towards Electroman. Clang. ZZZZT. Both were hit by the other's move at the same time and flew out. Peter, in the air, was stiff from the electric current's paralysis, only able to let inertia send him crashing towards the roadside. Just then, Peter felt a strong hand supporting him from behind. It was Su Ming. Su Ming watched Electroman, who was originally about to cooperate obediently under Peter's persuasion, but was completely enraged by the sniper's careless shot. These police officers really know how to provide a good assist. How eager are they to earn merit, get promoted, and receive a raise? Seeing Xiaozhiju flying backward towards him, Su Ming casually supported him. Peter, steadying himself, saw the familiar face, both surprised and delighted. This is great. It's Silver Duke, sir. Sir, how are you here? His tone contained a hint of excitement. He didn't know if his performance just now was acceptable in Silver Duke's eyes, and he looked at Su Ming somewhat awkwardly, subconsciously hiding his damaged web shooter behind his back. He instantly forgot that he was still in battle. Are you kidding? With Silver Duke here, is Electroman still a problem? Su Ming found Peter's appearance a bit amusing. The chicken soup he poured into him back then wasn't wasted. The young man seemed to respect him even more. Recalling, it had been a while since they last met, and Xiaozhiju seemed to have grown a lot. The hand that supported Peter then patted Xiaozhiju's back, considering there were too many people around and he couldn't call Peter by name. Xiaozhiju, this is a long story. Are you all right? Su Ming's appearance gave Peter full confidence. Hearing Silver Duke's kind greeting, Peter wished he could tell Su Ming everything that had happened to him recently. I'm fine, sir. Recently, I've been investigating what happened to my parents back then. Oh, and I'm also planning to confess to Gwen. Before he finished speaking, everyone's vision plunged into darkness. The unsupported Electroman, Max, was slammed hard into an advertising screen by the fire hydrant Peter had swung. He then pulled two thick cables and shoved them into his chest, beginning to frantically absorb all surrounding electricity. All the billboards in New York's Times Square instantly went dark due to insufficient power, and what was once the brightest corner of the city was now plunged into complete darkness. After a powerful energy fluctuation, the surrounding buildings suffered extensive damage from an impact, and various building materials fell from high altitudes. The onlookers instantly switched back to escape mode, screaming and running in all directions. The transition was incredibly smooth. And at this moment, Electroman had transformed into Electroman Pro, Super Blue Electroman. With his energy off the charts, he floated in the air under the effect of the electric field, like a deity. Pop pop. Electric light surged from his hands, releasing powerful lightning bolts to launch indiscriminate attacks on the people on the street who had just mocked and cursed him. Peter's words were interrupted by the sudden change. Looking at the figure standing in the air, Xiaozhiju quickly thought about how to deal with him. Su Ming now had a giant umbrella floating above his head. Realizing that the huge advertising frame, affected by the energy, was falling towards him, Su Ming activated magnetic control, and incidentally, squeezed the advertising frame into a large umbrella. For no other reason, the fire hydrant Peter had just broken was now gushing out water columns several meters high, almost drenching Su Ming. While stabilizing the high-altitude falling object, he also blocked this wave of artificial rain. Peter had never seen such a method. Looking at the giant metal umbrella that also covered him, Xiaozhiju was stunned. Oh my god. Silver Duke. Sir, so strong. Su Ming saw that Electroman on the street had already started his barbecue, yet Peter was still staring at the umbrella, distracted. He nudged Xiaozhiju with his elbow. Do you smell anything? Peter snapped back to reality. Hearing Su Ming's words, he looked bewildered. What smell? Two black lines appeared on Su Ming's face as he pointed to the opposite side. The smell of barbecue. From the passers-by. Only then did Peter realize that in the moment he was dazed, Max had already begun retaliating against the populace. Peter, who had rushed out, heard Su Ming's reminder, his eyes lit up, and he turned to run in another direction. I wonder if the glowing one will short-circuit if it gets some rain. Watching Xiaozhiju turn and run towards a fire truck, Su Ming said with satisfaction. As expected of a university student, his reaction is quick. Taste this. 100,000 volts. The surging energy seemed inexhaustible. Max felt like Thor now, scattering lightning onto the street as if it cost nothing. The pleasure of revenge, with the falling lightning, washed away the humiliation in his heart wave after wave. Max at this moment wanted to shout out loud in exhilaration. Ah, yes, he shouted, but it wasn't exhilarating at all. A sudden high-pressure water stream instantly disrupted the volatile energy within him. He short-circuited. Splat. Paralyzed, he fell to the ground, and with difficulty, turned his head to see a sight that made him want to vomit blood. Spider-Man, wearing a firefighter's helmet, was humming a song at the very front of a line, continuously drenching him with a high-pressure water gun. His relaxed and cheerful demeanor made it seem as if he was merely extinguishing a pile of burning garbage. Max's self-esteem was once again severely hurt by Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Seeing Xiaozhiju successfully deal with Electroman, a large group of police officers rushed forward and tied Max into a big zongzi with insulating material. The surrounding onlookers, seeing the villain defeated, spontaneously offered enthusiastic applause and cheers, occasionally accompanied by a few loud whistles. Did you see that? Spider-Man is amazing. As expected of a superhero. Spider-Man seemed to be talking to someone just now. By the way, did you see that umbrella in the air? I saw it. I almost couldn't believe my eyes. Incredible. Su Ming felt it was almost time to go back. A stroll downstairs allowed him to enjoy a visual feast, so he was in a good mood overall. As for Peter, Su Ming didn't plan to greet him, hadn't he seen him surrounded by media reporters. This young man trusted him so much, so helping him out once was only reasonable. At this moment, Su Ming's phone rang. Nick Fury's unique voice came through the receiver. Destiny, my friend, are you interested in a trip to New Mexico? A commission. Su Ming's first reaction was that S.H.I.E.L.D. was looking for his help again. Oh, director, are you in some trouble? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe for more videos.